Silent Nightmare. Chapter 1. The Johnsons were what you might call a picture-perfect family. Tom and Jane had been high school sweethearts, gotten married right after college, and now lived in a pleasant split-level home in Evergreen Hills with their 3 kids. Emma was the oldest at 9 years old, a quiet blonde girl who loved to read. 7-year-old Michael had his dad's dark hair and was always moving, always shouting, always kicking a ball around the house no matter how many times Jane asked him not to. And little Anna had just turned 5, the baby of the family with her mom's bright eyes and cheerful grin. As Christmas drew closer, the Johnson home transformed with familiar holiday decorations, garlands on the banisters, Jane's collection of nutcrackers covering every surface, twinkling lights tracing the windows. Tom put up the artificial tree in the corner of the living room, fluffing out the fake pine branches while Michael tore open a box of ornaments accumulated over the years. Each one held memories: the red felt gingerbread men Anna had made in preschool, the glass bulb with a tiny picture of baby Emma inside from her first Christmas. "It's crooked, Dad," Michael critiqued, always eager to point out flaws. "Fix it." Tom adjusted the tree stand, glancing over his shoulder. "There, how's that?" Michael tilted his head, considering. Now the top is leaning." With a dramatic sigh, Tom straightened the treetop. "My goodness, so picky. Maybe we need Santa to bring someone a level next year." He shot his son a wink. They continued decorating, carefully hanging treasured ornaments amidst laughter and Christmas music. Tom lifted Anna so she could place the angel on top. As the family stepped back to admire their work, Jane set down a tray of steaming mugs. "Looks perfect," she proclaimed. Tom noticed Michael squinting at one branch. "What's up, buddy?" "There's still some empty spots." He was right. Despite their substantial ornament collection, a few gaps remained among the boughs. Over the years, some cherished bulbs had met unfortunate fates thanks to rambunctious children or simply stopped working. Jane handed Tom his coffee. "We could pick up a few new ones. Maybe make an evening of it, go to dinner, check out the holiday shops downtown." "Yay, ornaments!" Anna cheered, while Emma smiled behind her own mug. Tom chuckled. "All right, ornament shopping it is." Later that week, the Johnson family ventured downtown after Tom finished his shift at the accounting firm. Evergreen Hills transformed each December, lighting up with cheer. Garlands and snowflakes hung above bustling sidewalks now crowded with families enjoying the season. A giant Christmas tree towered over the main town square, casting an almost magical glow. Vendors hawked hot chocolate and roasted nuts as carolers sang on street corners. Michael and Emma peered eagerly into store windows decorated with tinsel, wreaths, and figurines. Jane paused to dig the kids' mittens from her purse and tug them on snugly. After a festive dinner at Luigi's, they explored gift shops lining the main avenue. But most ornaments cost a small fortune or just didn't appeal. The ones Michael liked best involved superheroes or spaceships. Emma gravitated toward delicate angel or woodland creature designs. And Anna became obsessed with a peacock ornament which Jane reluctantly placed back on the shelf after reading the outrageous price tag. With the kids growing restless, Tom was about to suggest heading home even though they hadn't found the perfect ornaments. But approaching the last shop on the block, he noticed a sign he didn't recall from Christmases past. Black spidery script marked the dusty window, Kringle and Amp, CO, Holiday Goods. "How about this place?" Tom gestured. The exterior looked considerably less flashy than their neighbors. No wreaths on the door, just a single string of white bulbs framing the display. But perhaps somewhere more offbeat held reasonably priced finds. A brass bell jangled above their heads entering the narrow shop. Mysterious Kringles indeed brimmed with an expansive collection of Christmas decor. sparkling garlands draped from corner to corner underneath strings of multicolored lights. An entire wall of shelves showcased classic holiday characters: Santas, reindeer, nutcrackers, snowmen. Glittering angels watched them drift inside. But most striking was the overwhelming scent: pine, cinnamon, nutmeg, and something deeper Tom couldn't quite place. Rich and exotic, like walking into a winter forest. Michael wrinkled his nose. "Smells funny in here." "I like it," Anna declared, inhaling deeply. "Smells like Christmas." Jane glanced around uncertainly. "Are they still open?" "I don't see anyone." As if summoned, the back door creaked open. An elderly gentleman with a deeply lined face and shock of white hair entered, leaning heavily on a cane. "Good evening," he wheezed. "Can I help you find anything?" Before anyone could reply, Michael pointed overhead. "Whoa, look!" Dozens of antique ornaments dangled from the ceiling on red ribbons: opulent peacocks, delicate roses, regal kings and queens. Glittering shapes and figures of every size and color. Emma's eyes widened. "They're so pretty." "Indeed they are." The proprietor smiled, showcasing an uneven set of yellowed teeth. Up close, Tom noticed a milky quality to his left eye. "Please, have a look around. Holidays are my favorite time of year." Enchanted, they wandered the aisles. Michael immediately zoomed toward a display of race cars and superheroes. Emma became enamored by the winter animal collection: polar bears, penguins, Arctic foxes. Meanwhile, Anna ran ahead of Jane, fixated on the overhead ornaments. She stopped abruptly at one bizarre specimen dangling alone in a shadowy corner: a red bulb etched with intricate gold scrollwork and dotted with small mirrors that sparkled ominously in the dim light. "Wow, pretty," Anna murmured. She stretched onto her tiptoes, fumbling to untangle the ribbon. Concern furrowed Jane's brow as she studied the unusual piece. Before she could stop Anna, the proprietor suddenly appeared behind them. "You have a good eye," he exclaimed, making Jane jump. She hoisted Anna to her hip as the man carefully freed the ornament. Up close, she noticed disturbing features carved into the crimson glass: grotesque human-like faces seeming to grimace and shout soundlessly. The proprietor extended his palm, the ornament glinting. "Here we are. An excellent choice." Jane repressed a shudder, inexplicably uneasy. "Oh, I don't think that one is quite right for a child, thank you though, but I want it." Anna grabbed for the ornament, nearly wriggling from Jane's arms. The man weighed it almost reverently before Jane. His filmed-over eye bored into hers. "Nonsense, my dear." His voice dropped, nearly lost amidst all the Yuletide tunes piping through speakers. "Few appreciate such treasures, but I believe your lovely daughter has an eye for the exquisite." Before Jane could object, Tom appeared behind them, examining the peculiar bulb. "Well now, that's certainly different." He raised his eyebrows at Jane. "Did you pick this one out, Anna?" "Aha." She made another swipe for the prize. Tom studied his daughter's expectant face. Then he met Jane's uncertain eyes, her uneasiness palpable. She held his gaze for a silent moment, shaking her head oh so slightly. "No, Tom knelt before Anna, hands on her shoulders. "I tell you what, sweet pea. Let's take some more time and look around this whole place very carefully for the perfect ornaments. Sound good?" Her little face fell, but Tom tickled her belly until she surrendered to giggles. Jane exhaled while Tom stood. He turned to the man with a polite smile. "You have such a unique inventory here. What did you say your name was?" The little man drew himself straighter. "I am Mr. Kringle, of course." His cloudy eyes seemed to bore brighter for a moment, sending another involuntary shiver through Jane. Tom laughed. "Of course. Well, thanks for letting us browse, Mr. Kringle. The senior Kringle retreated wordlessly toward the counter, leaning upon his cane. His gaze lingered unsettlingly. But Tom just ushered his family further into the forest of decorations. They wove carefully through the labyrinthine shop, inspecting items of increasing spectacle. Sequined snowflakes and bejeweled berries. Entire Christmas villages with working toy trains. Exotic nutcrackers with intensely lifelike eyes. Michael stopped short before a towering fir ornamented from top to bottom with race cars. Whoa! He breathed. Best tree ever. Tom inspected an adjacent glass shelf lined neatly with unusual wooden ornaments. Each looked hand-carved into an identical, almost glyph-like pattern, circles within circles etched with delicate symbols. He traced the characters, frowning. What do you make of these? Jane pursed her lips as she examined them closely. Very pagan-looking. She kept her voice low. Kinda witchcrafty if you ask me. My thoughts exactly. Tom eyed the carvings suspiciously. They're beautifully made, but I can't read any of the symbols. Can you? Jane shook her head. They almost seemed to shift mockingly before her eyes. Tom exhaled. Well, they give me the heebie-jeebies. But clearly we're in some kind of antique Christmas basem. He halted mid-sentence, catching movement in his periphery. Mr. Kringle appeared silently beside them, leaning predatorily over his cane. Find anything to your liking? The reedy voice echoed from below. Forcing a congenial smile, Tom slid the shelf cover back over the unusual sigils. You really do have some one-of-a-kind pieces. He gestured politely at Jane. My wife was just noticing how unique some of these hand-carved ornaments are. Where do they come from? Mr. Kringle shifted closer, each step rasping over the worn floorboards. Oh, from all over. His cloudy eye looked almost jaundiced beneath the twinkling lights. I source rare Christmas ephemera from many exotic locales. His gnarled fingers danced along the shelf edge and Tom repressed an urge to pull away. But my personal favorites, Mr. Kringle continued, are the glass ornaments. Over there. He gestured with his cane toward Emma across the maze of decor. The girl stood reverently before a towering fir ornamented with emerald glass bulbs. Even at a distance, Tom spotted incredibly delicate gold filigree swirling across each orb, glinting like ancient artifacts in a museum. Mr. Kringle hobbled toward Emma without awaiting a response. Exchanging unnerved looks with Jane, Tom followed cautiously behind. Emma didn't seem to notice their approach, spellbound by the shimmering ornaments. Her palm hovered hesitantly over one piece, and up close Tom better saw the almost frighteningly intricate metalwork twisting across the surface. It depicted some kind of folkloric winter scene alive with minute detail, feathered robes and sharp talons dragging hapless victims into shadowy depths as they screamed soundlessly in the firelight gleam. Tom's skin prickled, instincts screaming louder by the second. Get out, get out, get out. But Emma's hand drifted closer as though to stroke the glass curves. Even Jane looked unexpectedly captivated, head tilting in study as candle-shaped ornaments glinted ominously around Emma's angelic silhouette. Before Tom could react, Mr. Kringle abruptly grasped Emma's hovering fingers in his gnarled grip. Tom flinched violently but forced himself still, pulse racing. The old man guided Emma's palm against the chilling glass. There, Kringle encouraged in a sibilant exhale. Feel how smoothly it's carved. Fine work the human hand can birth, when properly motivated. Tom glimpsed Emma's entranced face, placid and almost worshipful. His stomach plunged at her empty expression. Asterisk what the hell? Asterisk. Suddenly Anna skipped up behind them, peering between the adults to snag her own look. She craned sideways, then halted completely still, gaping up at the ornament Emma now cradled. "Oh!" Jane visibly startled Jared from her reverie. Clearing his throat, Tom firmly drew Emma and Anna back by the shoulders. "Well. Very pretty, but we should keep looking." He forced brightness into the strained words. "Don't want to miss any options for our tree." He herded the group deeper into the winter Pandora's box, skin crawling as Mr. Kringle followed with rasping steps. They wove anxiously until Michael raced up with 2 small boxes. "Guys, check these out." Nestled carefully inside laid exquisite stained glass ornaments, one a winter skater gliding across an ice pond, the next delicately depicting St. Nicholas himself. Michael extended his find toward Mr. Kringle eagerly. "Aren't these awesome? Can we get them as long as we're careful?" Before Kringle could reply, Tom quickly noted the price tags and gave a low whistle. "Those sure are super neat, but maybe a bit too fancy for the likes of us." He playfully mussed Michael's hair despite his son's scowl. "How about we each just pick a special one as a souvenir? Our budget was simpler ornaments, remember?" Michael sighed loudly but returned the boxes after a stern paternal look. Emma and Anna selected 2 common shiny bright bulbs from a bargain barrel by the front counter. As Tom dug out his wallet, he scrutinized Mr. Kringle handling the register with arthritically swollen fingers. Behind dusty spectacles, the jaundiced eye followed his movements almost hungrily even. As Kringle wheezed good tidings for the season. Shivering inside his coat, Tom ushered everyone out the door with their meager finds. The anxious father swore he glimpsed a shadow twist strangely inside the store as the entrance bell jangled shut. Pausing on the sidewalk, he scanned his family's faces by the glittering holiday lights. "Well, that place gave me the heebie-jeebies," he announced with exaggerated drama, rubbing his arms. "What'd say we grab some hot cocoa to warm back up on me?" The kids cheered excitedly, already forgetting the strange shop as they laughed and danced ahead toward the square. Emma peered almost wistfully over her shoulder at the facade before Jane called her name more insistently. As his daughter finally shuffled away, Tom released a slow breath. Beside him, Jane shook her head. "That owner," she hissed low through her teeth. "He was so creepy. And did you see how weirdly?" Emma was staring at that one ornament. She glanced back at Kringle and Amp, Co's darkened display window. "Gave me chills." Tom nodded, frowning. "Seriously. Everyone was acting kinda strange in there." He laughed uneasily, puffing out his cheeks. "Phew. Maybe the kicky fragrance was getting to us all." Jane raised an eyebrow. "Oh sure, the potpourri made our kids all zombie-eyed." "Very logical." Tom held up his hands, grinning. "Hey, 'tis the season for Christmas magic, right?" Jane just elbowed his ribs, unable to keep from smiling too as they watched Michael try teaching Anna a clumsy Irish jig by the twinkling tree. Still, neither parent could completely shake the lingering sense of unease that seemed to peer from the shop windows long after Kringle and Amp, Co disappeared behind them into the bustling holiday crowds. Chapter 2. The ride home from Kringle and Amp, Co was full of Christmas tunes and laughter, the unease of the odd shop fading behind them. After tucking the kids into bed, Tom helped Jane wrap festive garlands down the banister before collapsing exhausted onto the couch. Tom glanced at the meager plastic bag from their outing sitting forgotten on the coffee table. "So much for fancy new ornaments, eh?" Jane followed his gaze and snorted, shaking her head. "I still can't believe how bizarre that place was. And that owner." She visibly shivered. Tom pulled her into his chest reassuringly. "I know, he was super creepy. But hey, Anna and Emma love their shiny new bulbs." He exaggerated his grin until Jane finally smiled. "Yeah, guess you're right. And they were cheap." She leaned up to kiss him. I'm just glad to be home." They soon drifted off to sleep curled together under the glow of twinkling holiday lights. The next morning, Tom awoke to rain pattering softly at the windows. The heavy clouds outside set a cozier mood in the Johnson home. Jane baked gingerbread men with Anna while Christmas carols played. Tom and Michael constructed a Lego gingerbread house as the rich cookie smells wafted in from the kitchen. Emma sat nearby immersed in a novel, glancing up now and then to gently correct Mike's architecture. When the cookies finished cooling, Jane called everyone to decorate. Tom helped hoist Anna so she could carefully give each gingerbread man a face with thick icing and rainbow sprinkles. Michael preferred mounting as much candy as possible atop his sugary structure until it looked ready to collapse. Emma neatly traced frosty lace designs along the edges. Admiring their work, Jane suddenly clapped her hands. "Oh! We never added those new bulbs you kids picked out." She retrieved the Kringle and Amp Co. bag from the coffee table and offered it to Emma and Anna. Eagerly they dug inside, pulling out their new crimson and azure acquisitions. "Oh, so pretty!" Anna breathed. She dashed to the tree, standing on her tiptoes to place the bright blue bulb with utmost care on an upper bough. Emma followed more slowly, peering almost mesmerized into the blood-red glass in her palm. Dark shapes seemed to twist inside, shadows dancing across her rapt face beneath the trembling candlelight. "Here Em, let me help." Tom traded places with her, easily situating the disturbing ornament high on a central branch. He swallowed uneasily at the visceral faces glaring from inside the glass, more gruesome beneath the tree lights. "There we go, nice and visible." He attempted an encouraging smile, but Emma said nothing. She kept staring upwards with frightening intensity. The colorful reflections cast her sweet features in a more ominous mask. Tom waved his hand gently, frowning when she didn't blink. "Earth to Emma. Come back to us, Space Cadet." Finally she dragged her gaze down, eyes refocusing. "Huh. Oh. Pretty." She attempted a smile before drifting quietly back to her book. Tom watched her, nonplussed. Across the room he noticed Jane observing them with a similarly troubled expression. She raised her eyebrows pointedly, but Tom just gave a subtle shrug. "Kids." Brushing it off, the Johnson family enjoyed the rest of their rainy Sunday, movies, puzzles, board games. Emma seemed her usual self the rest of the day. When Tom headed upstairs late that night, he peeked into her room and smiled at his daughter's sleeping form curled beneath a mountain of stuffed animals. Behind him, the odd blood-red ornament glinted in the tree downstairs as silent faces continued screaming. Over the next week, holiday festivities continued around the Johnson home. Jane took the kids to pick out secret Santa gifts for extended family while Tom worked overtime at the office preparing for vacation. He relished the late nights spent concentrating quietly alone. Until he started noticing the whispers. At first they blended innocuously with generic seasonal tunes floating through his headphones while Tom formatted spreadsheets. Just a faint melody he couldn't quite catch. But slowly the whispers grew more distinct, threading through the cheerful carols, insinuating themselves during his commute, his lunch break, even meetings with clients. Like a parasite boring relentlessly into his consciousness. Tom shook his head sharply, tapping his ears. Just fatigue from overwork, but the whispers persisted, lyrics just beyond comprehension. Exhausted and on edge late one night, Tom finally paused his documents to tug off his headphones with annoyed precision. "Alright, seriously, who the hell is that?" He glanced sharply behind him. Just the empty office, lights dimmed. The custodial staff had already come and gone. Frowning, he rose to check the surrounding workstations. But not even the cleaning crew lingered this late. Unnerved, Tom sank slowly back into his chair. He stared at the headphones lying accusingly on his spreadsheet like a sad prop comedian. Then leaning forward, he placed them intentionally back over his ears. The incessant whispers returned instantly, almost smugly beckoning him closer, closer. Frustrated, he ripped off the headphones and flung them onto his desk. Nope. Cannot deal with this right now. Snatching keys and coat, Tom stormed out praying he could finally find some peace in the sanctity of home. But the sinister susurrations pursued him all the way down the dark deserted office stairs to the parking garage, through his long drive past rows of glowing homes filled with happier families. Right up to Tom's own front door where a massive fir wreath decorated with twinkling LEDs now hung, sending multicolored halos chasing across the darkened lawn. Inside at last, he sagged against the smooth wooden door, pulse racing as adrenaline ebbed. Silence filled his saltwater ears. Oh, thank God. Gradually Tom's breath slowed to normal. Just stress and too much work piled upon seasonal pressures. He was overtired. Letting a creepy shop owner's theatrics get under his skin so easily. Pathetic. Tom snorted, shaking his head at his own skittish foolishness as he hung his coat. But passing his son's bedroom, Tom froze. A flicker of movement at the top of the stairs caught his eye. Heart jolting, he peered up slowly into the dim living room. Emma stood motionless before the Christmas tree, bathed in twilight shadows and the blood-hued ornament's glassy sheen. As Tom watched, paralyzed, she reached one small hand toward the bulb. The screaming faces inside seemed to contort wildly, desperately. Emma? Tom's voice cracked. He ascended the creaking steps, pulse thrumming. Sweetie, what are you doing out of bed? She didn't respond. Hands still hovering beneath the tree's spindly branches, Emma's eyes stayed locked on that shaking crimson ornament. Tom moved closer across the carpet, skin crawling. Emma. Emma. His sharp tone finally broke her trance with a bodily flinch. She jerked her hand back, turning to face him. Dark hair wisped wildly across her eyes. Daddy. Confusion flooded her face for a moment, before her young features again went blank. Tom knelt before her, clasping her slender shoulders. Honey, please, you're worrying me. What's going on? But Emma just blinked vacantly at him. Then her empty gaze drifted back to that trembling blood-red glass. They want to play, she whispered. Tom's stomach dropped into icy depths. What? Who does? Emma's face remained placid. Them. She lifted one small finger toward the bulb. Inside, the shadow screams echoed louder, almost gleeful. Tom's pulse pounded in his ears. Gripping Emma tighter, he pivoted her forcefully away from the tree. Nope. No way. Time for all little girls to get some sleep. Practically lifting her, he carried Emma swiftly back to bed despite her startled cries. Tucking the blankets firmly beneath her chin, Tom managed a trembling smile. Snug as a bug. Now, no more leaving your room tonight, okay? You need lots of good dreams to feel nice and festive tomorrow. He smoothed her hair gently despite his own panicking thoughts. With a soft kiss to her furrowed brow, Tom rose on shaking legs and closed her door tightly. Back downstairs he collapsed onto the living room sofa, breathing hard. Asterisk, what the hell just happened? Asterisk, he dropped his pounding skull into his hands, groaning. Eventually Tom's pulse settled, until he realized the invasive whispers still oozed from some unseen corner. Lips barely moving, no intelligible words. But the sinister susurrations seemed almost to mock him now with their razor grins and hungry yellowed eyes. Cursing under his breath, Tom fled to bed. But even after switching on his white noise machine, those creeping whispers needled relentlessly at the edge of his psyche well past midnight. waiting patiently for dreams to drag him back within reach of their gnarled greedy claws. Chapter 3. Over the next few days, Emma's bizarre nighttime behavior continued to disturb her parents. More than once Tom or Jane caught her wandering downstairs in an apparent trance, fixated by the crimson ornament shimmering ominously beneath the Christmas tree. They'd quickly usher her back to bed with gentle admonishments, exchanging helpless looks once she drifted back to sleep. What could they really do? Take her to a doctor and confess she was somehow sleepwalking under the spell of a creepy glass bulb? It sounded absurd. So they doubled down on festive family time, movies, baking, drives to admire neighborhood light displays, even a visit from Santa at the local mall. Emma appeared her happy self whenever they kept her engaged. But occasionally Tom would notice her smile slip, eyes drifting to seek any glint of red out the corners of windows. Haunting shadows always followed just out of sight. By Christmas Eve those shadows had crept fully into their home. The morning started pleasantly enough. Jane took the kids for last-minute grocery shopping so Tom could wrap gifts undisturbed. Cruising his favorite holiday playlist, he sipped spiked eggnog while measuring out reindeer print paper. But the cheerful tunes slowly molded into more sinister echoes. Whispers threading through jingling bells and choral harmonies, lyrics just beyond comprehension. Tom grimaced as the unwelcome susurrations rose louder, permeating every song now. Nope. Not today, Satan. Grumbling, he shut off the stereo completely. Working in silence, Tom struggled focusing over the invasive mental whispers. They seemed to slither and twist through his thoughts no matter how he tried tuning them out. Like the crimson ornament itself had burrowed inside him, its gleeful screams so palpable he swore he could almost. Dad! Tom jerked violently, scissors clattering to the floor. Heart racing, he whirled to see Emma hovering behind him with wide eyes. Oh geez. Emma, you scared me. He attempted a calming chuckle. I thought you were out with Mom. She's getting stuff for the reindeer. I asked to come home. Emma tilted her head, brow pinching with concern far too mature for her young face. Daddy, are you okay? Tom ran both hands down his face, sighing. He opened his mouth but only managed a strangled half-laugh. Emma drifted closer. You look really tired. And your thoughts sound angry. How come? Ice trickled down Tom's spine. What? What do you mean about my thoughts? She blinked innocently up at him. In your head. Whispers keep buzzing all mad. Why are they yelling? The scissors glinted mockingly from the floor. Tom stared speechless as Emma patiently awaited his response. I'm not sure, honey. He licked his lips, pulse racing. Hey, could you do Dad a favor and go watch TV for a bit? Maybe put on a Christmas movie? I've gotta wrap your gifts before Mom gets back. Emma hesitated, clearly unconvinced. But she finally nodded and headed for the living room. Tom listened to cartoons click on, releasing the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. What the hell did she hear? He hadn't spoken aloud, and Tom sure as shit didn't consider the invasive whispers his own thoughts. Unease gnawing his gut, he scooped the scissors and set them well out of reach on a high shelf just in case. 20 minutes later, the garage door rumbled open. Jane called greetings, her voice bright but strained from a morning of holiday crowds. Tom met them in the foyer, taking grocery bags so she could unloop Anna and Mike's scarves. Phew. Glad that's done. Jane stretched her back until it cracked. I swear people turn rabid this time of year. Tom chuckled, then paused. Hey, where's Em? Jane nodded wearily toward the living room. Oh, she's in there watching TV. Everything go okay while I was out? Yeah. All good. Tom hoped his smile appeared more genuine than it felt. No need stressing Jane out further so close to the big day. But passing through the front room en route to the kitchen, his eyes stuck briefly on that glinting blood-red ornament. For a heartbeat, the bulb seemed to swell larger, gleaming faces pressed hideously against the glass from within, screaming desperately for release. Flinching away, Tom escaped to help Jane unpack groceries with shaking hands. He didn't notice Emma standing statue-still near the tree, peering up at that trembling scarlet glass. Eyes empty as a clear winter sky. The afternoon passed in a blur of festive domesticity, baking cookies, setting the table with Jane's fancy holiday porcelain. Tom kept checking his watch, antsy. His mom and siblings would arrive any minute for their annual Christmas Eve celebration, though for once he actually dreaded the added company. All day he'd been battling to act normal around his family, especially Emma. He kept catching her vacant stare directed anywhere that crimson ornament glinted. The invasive whispers wormed relentlessly inside him all the while. Sure enough, the doorbell soon jangled, accompanied by thumping knocks. Laughing nieces and nephews swarmed in with Grandma, Uncle Mitch, and Aunt Carol in loud holiday sweaters. Hugs and handshakes exchanged all around amidst flurries of falling snow. Jane raised her voice over the bustling guests. "Mitch, there's beer in the fridge. And Carol, could you give me a hand?" Aunt and nephew answered her summons. Tom's Grandma Mag squeezed his arm with relief. "Woo, so good to get out of that cold. Where are my great-grands?" Before Tom could respond, Emma wandered up and took Mag's hand politely. "Merry Christmas, Grandma. My coat's the pink one in the closet." Mag smiled down at her. "Well, aren't you so grown up and responsible? Come on, Han, let's get comfy." As she steered Emma toward the entry, Tom watched uneasily. Without warning, his daughter glanced back over her shoulder, eyes sharpening from vacant politeness into something far more cold and calculating. Tom shivered. Glancing around quickly, he noticed Jane arranging dishes in the kitchen. He made his way over, clearing his throat. "Hey, have you noticed Emma acting a little weird lately?" He kept his voice low. Jane paused, blowing a stray hair off her forehead. Weird how?" Tom shifted, unsure how to explain without sounding crazy. "I dunno, just staring off, all zoning out sometimes. And she said something earlier about, hearing angry whispers in my head." He forced an awkward chuckle. But Jane didn't smile. "Wait, what?" She dropped her dish towel, frowning. "Whispers in your..." A sudden crash and scream interrupted her. Heart lurching, they raced into the living room to find Uncle Mitch sprawled awkwardly on the floor beneath the upended Christmas tree. Glass bulb shards and pine needles scattered wildly, the entire fur now tilted half off its stand. "Dad!" Michael shouted, halting his panicking race toward Mitch. Tom swooped down to help Mitch. Carefully back to his feet, brushing bits of debris off his sweater. "Oh God, Mitch, are you okay? What happened?" Mitch groaned, gingerly testing his weight on one foot. "Ow, dang it. Sorry folks, I just tripped on a wire there. My bad." He gestured behind him. The surge protector lay unplugged where someone must have accidentally yanked it from the wall outlet. As Tom helped Mitch limp painfully toward the sofa, his mother Mag scared. "What a shame. Are any keepsake bulbs broken?" Jane circled the mess, gingerly lifting fragile shards by the tree skirt edge. Most ornaments seemed intact, but she shook her head sadly. I think your antique nutcracker one broke, Mom." She held up the pieces for Mag to see. "It looks pretty far gone." Mag waved it off. "Oh pish posh, things can be replaced. Unlike my only son if he'd gone down on these creaky old bones." She elbowed Mitch, who managed a pained chuckle. While the guests fussed over Mitch's possible sprained ankle, Tom glanced uneasily around the room. Amidst all the chaos, only Emma sat calmly on the sofa watching tree cleanup efforts. She caught Tom's eye, face unnervingly impassive. Then he spotted it, the blood-red ornament lay untouched in Emma's lap. His heart stuttered. Waiting. Here, Dad, you fix the tree. Michael handed Tom the surge protector. I'll grab the broom. Numbly Tom took it, insides writhing. His gaze stayed locked with Emma's across the room as everyone else bustled about, already moving past the accident. Only the two of them seemed suspended in time, that crimson glass pulsing like a hideous heart between them. Tom, would you grab the ladder? Carol's voice broke his horrified trance. I can't reach the higher ornaments. Tom nodded jerkily, pulse racing. With immense effort he tore his eyes off Emma and headed downstairs on wooden legs. Behind him that red glass glimmered. Later over dinner, conversation ebbed naturally toward holiday mishaps. Aunt Carol laughed the hardest, remembering Tom's first disastrous attempt baking Christmas cookies solo at age 8. Oh gosh, that's right. He nearly burned the house down. Mag wiped her eyes, chuckling. And you cried thinking Santa would put you on the naughty list now because you ruined Christmas. Everyone roared while Tom grinned self-consciously. He lifted his wine glass in mock defeat. Hey, luckily things worked out alright in the end. Usually do. His smile faltered briefly as Tom caught his daughter's eye again from down the table. Behind that sweet young face, a strange coldness lingered in her stare that raised goosebumps on his neck. After dessert, the kids raced off to play a loud made-up game while Tom built a fire. Jane convinced Mitch to elevate his swollen foot. Carol coerced her brother into a gentle shoulder massage despite his theatrical protests. From the mantel, Jane grabbed a stocking stuffer. Oh, this fell out earlier. Here you go, sweetie. Tom glanced over to see Jane holding a small gift bag labeled for Emma in Mag's flawless cursive. His daughter took the present politely. Thank you. Ooh, whatcha get? Carol stretched her neck toward Emma curiously until Mitch swatted her shoulder. Emma slid out a slender box decorated with snowmen. Carefully she lifted off the lid, revealing a shiny pair of crafting scissors shaped like a graceful white crane. Oh, how unique. Jane admired the gift as Emma experimentally snipped the blades. Those will be perfect to use on craft projects, huh? You can make such pretty snowflakes this winter. Emma slowly set down the wrapping, eyes pinning the scissors almost magnetically. The stainless steel blades glinted as gracefully as the crane details etched along each arm. Watching Emma test the spring-loaded hinge, Tom shivered. Again her placid features seemed to veil something far darker, and disturbingly familiar. His pulse raced, remembering her vacant eyes from that late night by the Christmas tree, reaching toward the lighted branches as if compelled by some sinister force. Daddy, play. Anna suddenly plopped next to Tom, thrusting a deck of cards toward him. He jumped violently, heart lurching up his throat as Anna stared, puzzled by his reaction. Across the room Emma's gaze darted up, watching them. Tom exhaled shakily, pulling Anna into his lap. You scared me, Button. He ruffled her hair, voice intentionally bright. But card games? Now that sounds like more fun than I can handle. He focused on Anna's silly made-up rules, pretending not to feel Emma's eyes boring into him from the couch. Like cold sharp points of her new stainless scissors poised directly at his heart. The evening passed amiably enough by the fire's golden glow. Someone eventually turned on a Yule log channel for ambience. But even surrounded by laughing families swapping stories with cups of spiked cocoa, Tom felt icy fingertips skitter down his neck whenever Emma wandered too near. He caught her more than once drifting silently around the Christmas tree whenever conversation diverted attention. She'd stare for long moments up at that gleaming blood-red ornament, face perfectly blank, watching inner demons dance across glass prison walls. After Mag started yawning frequently, Jane glanced at the clock. Wow, nearly 10 p.m. Should we start wrapping up, Mom? Mag waved her off, mid-story about Uncle Mitch's childhood baseball blunders. But Tom stood quickly, clapping his hands. Actually, Jane's right, it's getting late for these old bones. He tried gently moving his mother toward the entryway closet. You'll need all your energy tomorrow for present opening. Carol helped Mag into her heavy coat, affectionately adjusting the fluffy collar. Here, Mom, I already pre-warmed your car for you. Oh pish, stop your fussing. But Mag patted Carol's gloved hand. All right, fine, I know when my presence has worn out its welcome. She chuckled, turning to pull Jane and Tom in by their elbows conspiratorially. Try leaving out an extra plate of cookies for me, won't you? Jane laughed. We always do. Drive safe, okay? Hugs and laughter circled round once more as the family bundled up under the glowing porch light. Snow drifted ethereally through the gleaming solstice night like crystallized spirits. Mitch leaned his crutches against the railing, thumping fists over his heart. Thanks again for having us. Really takes the gloom out of a busted ankle. Tom clapped his shoulder. Of course, mi casa es su casa. Heal up. We'll see you tomorrow. At last the cars pulled safely from the driveway, taillights vanishing around the snowy street corner. Silence blanketed the neighborhood, peaceful under winter's hushed veil. Jane exhaled as they turned back inside. Well, I'd say that was lovely. Tom nodded, tension easing slightly now they were alone. Yeah, sorry I rushed them out at the end there. No, you read my mind. Jane slipped off her sweater, heading for the closet. I'm exhausted. Could really use some downtime, just our family, you know. Right there with ya. Tom hooked an arm around her waist, kissing her temple. Jane smiled up at him softly. Then her face changed, glancing over his shoulder, eyes widening, skin blanching white. Jane. Tom followed her horrified stare. Behind them near the Christmas tree, Emma stood clutching her new stainless scissors. Glaring directly at little Michael near the fireplace, honing in with an awful predatory focus that raised every hair on Tom's body. Chapter 4. Everything slowed, air solidifying in Tom's lungs. He watched helplessly as Emma drifted toward Michael by the fire, sharp blades glinting, ready to plunge directly into his son's exposed neck. Emma. Lunging forward, Tom's voice tore out thunderous. She froze instantly like pressing pause on a remote. Scissors hovered inches above Michael's crouching form, his little body blocking their dancing firelight. Heart seizing, Tom leapt and ripped the blades from Emma's hand in one violent motion. Daddy! Emma shrieked, visibly startled. Tears sprang to her eyes, lip trembling. You took my present. Go to your room. Tom bellowed before he could stop himself. Right now. Emma flinched violently again, stunned by his unchecked fury. But she obeyed, fleeing up the stairs in tears just as Jane rushed forward. Oh my God! What just happened? She grabbed Tom's wrist, breathing hard as her eyes bounced rapidly between the scissors and Emma's retreating footsteps. Tom's exhale shuddered out raggedly. Willing himself calm, he gently cupped Jane's shoulders and steered her toward the sofa away from Michael. Heart still slamming his ribs, Tom waited for Jane to meet his eyes. Her skin had gone sheet white. Sweetheart, I need you to listen and not totally freak out on me, okay? Tom tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind Jane's ear, holding her frightened gaze evenly. I think something, strange, has been happening with Emma ever since we bought that damn ornament." Jane's brows lowered. Glancing up sharply, she opened her mouth to respond, but no words emerged. Because Michael still knelt oblivious by the fireplace, eyes closed. Chin dipping toward his chest, the 7-year-old somehow drifted into peaceful sleep right on the hearth bricks as if cliffhanger drama hadn't almost claimed his life mere seconds ago. "Michael." Jane abruptly stood, urgency returning. Rushing over, she gently shook their son's shoulders. "Michael, wake up." But he didn't stir. Pine-scented firelight played harmlessly across his slack childish features. Jane shot Tom an incredulous "what the hell" stare over her shoulder. Shaking his head wordlessly, Tom helped scoop Michael's limp form up off the hard floor. They maneuvered his gangly limbs onto the couch before double-checking his breathing and vitals. His pulse seemed steady. Breathing normal too. Tom squeezed Jane's hand, watching the gentle rise and fall of their son's chest for any abnormalities. Maybe he was just more tired than we realized. He attempted a weak chuckle, but Jane clearly didn't share his optimism. She scowled toward the twinkling Christmas tree dominating its corner, crimson ornament gleaming blood red amidst glinting bulbs and LED strands. Tom followed her gaze, inhaling sharply. Because now beneath decorated boughs, Emma stood silently, arms slack at her sides. Rapt stare fixed once more upon that throbbing scarlet bulb. Without a word, Jane crossed the room and firmly shut white plantation blinds, cutting off view of the tree. Gaze shifting warily upstairs the direction Emma fled, she returned to Tom and touched his elbow. "Okay, talk. Something with that damn ornament in our house is seriously wrong." Swallowing hard, Tom explained the strange trances, the invasive whispers somehow infecting his thoughts, Emma's bizarre fixation bordering violent impulse after weeks of increasing unease centered around that bulb from Kringle and Amp Company. The words sounded insane aloud, but Jane listened with rising dread, clearly sensing the same sinister undercurrents plaguing their home. As Tom finished, Grandma Mag's antique cuckoo clock chimed midnight from across the room. Haunting bells echoed through the tense silence. Jane wrapped arms around herself, voice hushed. So that's why she was about to stab our son. An evil Christmas ornament hypnotized her. She gave a wild, startled laugh. Tom cringed at the absurdity spoken plainly aloud. "I know how ridiculous it sounds, believe me. But Jane, I swear ever since that shop something changed." He grasped her shoulders almost pleadingly. "You said yourself how bizarre Emma was acting by the tree that night." Jane just shook her head helplessly. Behind her, Michael remained motionless on the couch under a festive fleece throw as if nothing could wake him. Like a fairy tale curse. Tom exhaled raggedly. "Maybe we should take the kids to your sister's for tonight. Just to be absolutely safe." Jane hesitated, then nodded curtly. They moved urgently, gathering essentials to flee their own home on Christmas Eve. Michael stayed deeply unconscious when Tom scooped him up to carry toward the garage. Pausing near the blanketed tree, he noticed Jane pull something from her coat pocket, Grandma Mag's broken antique ornament shard with the dancing nutcracker. Jane turned it over in her palm, almost hypnotized, eyes reflecting twinkling fractals of crimson and emerald light. Tom watched uneasily until she set the shard down hard on an end table, visibly unnerved. Exchanging a loaded glance, they quickly secured sleeping Michael in his booster before moving upstairs to retrieve Emma. Neither dared voice the shared fear, whatever malevolent force controlled their daughter might not let her leave so easily tonight. Tom cautiously turned Emma's bedroom doorknob, half expecting it to stick stubbornly. But the barrier gave way without hesitation. Inside, Emma lay tucked beneath winter blankets just as he'd left her an hour before, only now sound asleep. Dark curls spilled across her pillow, face smooth and untroubled. Jane touched his wrist uncertainly. Think it's safe to move her? Tom frowned hard at Emma's deceptively angelic rest. No clue, but we're sure as hell gonna try. Help me get her coat. They managed bundling up Emma's limp sleeping form between them without stirring her once. Lifting gently, they maneuvered her carefully downstairs through shadowy rooms filled with watchful decorations and the distant jewel-bright glimmer of that sinister Christmas tree awaiting their return. At last all three kids lay secured in back seats, street lamps passing rhythmically over their still peaceful faces as Tom navigated side roads to avoid waking them. Neither he nor Jane spoke the entire 20-minute drive, hyper-focused on hurrying three precious heartbeats as far away from home's malevolent atmosphere as possible. Jane's sister Ruth met them on the snowy walkway, cradling young baby Hannah against one shoulder. Her welcoming smile dropped immediately, taking in Tom and Jane's harrowed expressions. Alarm flashed across Ruth's face, eyeing her sleeping niece and nephews being gently maneuvered inside. What happened? The kids are never this quiet. Ruth touched Emma's slack cheek worriedly after helping settle all three on basement couches. They aren't sick, are they? Jane shook her head jerkily, curls wisping free of her messy bun. No, nothing like that. Just, weird night. Sorry to barge in on you guys so late. Ruth shifted tiny Hannah higher on her hip, brow pinched anxiously. Jane, talk to me. Is everything okay at home? Glancing between Ruth and Emma's smooth, untroubled face, Tom gently drew Ruth toward the basement stairs, gesturing for Jane to follow. Here, let me make some tea and we can chat. Settled around Ruth's crackling fireplace, Tom kept it simple, concerning behavior from Emma he didn't want to expose visiting family to tomorrow. Ruth listened pensively, rhythmically patting baby Hannah's back until the infant finally slept. Honestly, that all sounds really frightening. Ruth shook her head, processing. Emma adores Michael though. I can't imagine her ever hurting him, even accidentally. Jane exhaled shakily. We know. But everything lately has just felt off. We didn't know where else to go tonight. She attempted a self-deprecating laugh that came out sharply hysterical. Ruth clasped Jane's hand. Hey, you're always safe here. We'll figure this out. Standing slowly, she transferred sleepy Hannah into a nearby bassinet. Why don't you both take my room tonight and try getting some rest? The kids will be fine down here. Jane opened her mouth to protest, but Ruth lifted a hand, brooking no argument. I insist. Now come on. She gently tugged them both off the sofa toward the stairs before more excuses could form. Too exhausted to resist Ruth's commanding motherly tone, Jane and Tom trudged after her gratefully. But glancing back, Tom eyed Emma's slight form tucked beneath a snowman blanket across the basement. A glint of silver scissors peeked from her coat pocket. Wrung out physically and emotionally beyond measure, neither Tom nor Jane had the energy to burden Ruth further about supernatural tree ornaments. They'd sound unhinged at best. So after quick showers they collapsed into Ruth's king mattress like two castaways reaching dry land. Familiar floral detergent scented their skin and hair off borrowed towels and pajamas. Outside wind hissed around snowy eaves as crimson shadows waited back on their own doorsteps for dawn to break. When pale winter light finally filtered behind Ruth's blackout blinds, Tom woke slowly. Disoriented, he stared blankly at unfamiliar walls a long minute before remembering. Beside him Jane didn't stir, face still smudged with yesterday's mascara buried against her pillow. Shivering in the frigid room, Tom tucked Jane's share of blankets tighter around her shoulders. Then he crept downstairs through still morning dimness toward hopeful signs of coffee brewing in the kitchen. He found Ruth cradling a steaming mug at the table. She looked up sharply as Tom entered, smoothing back flyaway strands with a tired half-smile. Well, good morning. Wasn't sure I'd see anyone coherent for a while yet. She raised her mug in mock salute. Coffee? Oh God, yes. Tom managed returning her weak smile. Taking the proffered refill, he sank heavily across from Ruth, staring into the bracing dark liquid without drinking. Ruth appraised him above her own mug. Rough night? Tom snorted, shaking his head helplessly. That's putting it mildly. Scrubbing both hands down his face, he met Ruth's gaze almost desperately, struggling to voice churning fears he'd left unspoken last night. He nearly asked about the kid's condition after everything. But before Tom could form the question, floorboards creaked softly behind them. He turned to see Jane shuffling through the doorway looking painfully exhausted. Wordlessly, Ruth fetched another steaming mug and set it before Jane as she sank defeatedly into a chair. Jane stared into fragrant coffee steam, voice cracking around the edges. Are the kids awake yet? Ruth frowned, glancing toward the basement doorway. You know, I haven't actually heard a peep from them. Unease pricked down Tom's neck. He shared an anxious look with Jane before they all moved quietly toward the rec room stairs. Descending cautiously, he held his breath, taking in 3 small unmoving lumps still buried beneath blankets across the sofa beds. Towering Christmas tree lights blinked cheerfully from the opposite corner, ornament branches gleaming. Emma sat squarely before the twinkling fir, face upturned to the shimmering wolf ornament fixed high upon a central bough. Rapt green stare reflected in the crimson glass, utterly transfixed. Emma! Oh my God! Jane rushed down the remaining stairs, nearly stumbling in her haste to reach Emma. But she halted abruptly several feet away as their daughter slowly turned toward them. Inside that small body some other presence stared back. Behind those sweet youthful features, alien eyes calcified sharp with predatory hunger. Ruth gasped softly, instinctively pulling Hannah closer against her chest. Tom moved purposely between Emma and his wife, pulse hammering. Emma. Emma, listen to Dad's voice, okay? He kept his volume gentle yet firm. It's time to stop staring at the ornaments now, sweetheart. We need you back here with us. He reached slowly toward her shoulder. But Emma recoiled from his outstretched hand like avoiding white-hot flame. A cruel smile curved her young lips. We don't wish to stop staring. We want to keep admiring all the pretty lights. People ignore our suffering trapped inside fragile glass walls for so long. But now we can make our own beauty from human pain. A childish giggle escaped Emma's throat, high and cold. Gooseflesh erupted across Tom's skin. Behind him, Jane whimpered softly in dismay while Ruth squeezed Hannah protectively. Gaze still locked with Emma's, Tom crouched down, carefully balancing on the balls of his feet. What do you mean, make beauty from pain? Who are you? He scrutinized closely for any glimmer of familiar light still inside those frozen eyes. This isn't my daughter talking right now. So tell me who I'm speaking with and what you want. Emma tilted her head almost curiously. When she replied, a strange accent colored the chilling words. Vivant, freedom. To escape our glassen prisons und play vis real flesh rather than imagined. She stared up again at the crimson ornament, expression disturbingly covetous. Ze smells of fur und blood are so intoxicating so near, ve could almost taste ze living veins. She inhaled deeply as if scenting the air for copper. Trace's eyes fell half-masked like recalling a favorite delicacy. Repressing his horror, Tom gentled his tone further. I understand wanting freedom from suffering. But we cannot solve injustice by hurting others. There are still good people worth protecting. He followed Emma's rapt gaze toward Michael and Anna's still sleeping forms behind him. My family has done nothing against you. We invite friendship, not fear. But first I need my daughter back safely. She's just an innocent child. Tom extended his hand slowly, hopeful. Please, may I have Emma back now? A shudder seemed to pass through Emma's slight frame. She blinked rapidly several times before peering up at Tom. Vacant disorientation swam across her young face instead of predatory hunger. Daddy? Confusion clouded Emma's soft tone once more. Why are you and Mom here? Her youthful gaze bounced curiously across Ruth's basement. Wait, why does Aunt Ruth have our Christmas tree? Relief crashed over Tom, nearly buckling his knees. He swept Emma into his arms, embracing her fiercely as she squeaked in surprise. Over his shoulder, 3 adult pairs of eyes watched warily until Jane also enfolded both in a crushing hug, half laughing and half sobbing against Emma's hair. Tom lifted his head gravely to meet Ruth's stunned expression. Voice low, he said, "Ruth, do not touch that ornament. In fact, I'm getting rid of the damn thing right now." "No!" Emma shrieked, face scrunching with sudden fury. She thrashed violently in Tom's and Jane's startled grip. "It's mine. Don't let Daddy take it. He doesn't understand. He wants me locked up again. Don't let him hurt me." Gasping cries punctuated her hysterical screams. Ruth rushed forward, trying to help contain Emma's unexpected strength as she fought them. Tiny fists and feet hammered wildly until all 3 adults lost hold. With unnatural speed, Emma darted up the nearest bookcase. She peered down manically past discarded board games, clutching a heavy geode paperweight aloft in one trembling hand. "Stay back. You can't stop us." Crazed eyes pinned Tom viciously from her elevated vantage. "Vil create divine beauty vis blood und bone. Starting vis your family." Cackling wildly, Emma drew back her weapon arm, crystalline edge gleaming. Heart-seizing, Tom tried desperately, waving everyone toward the stairwell behind him. But he spotted the target too late. Gasping, Jane whirled just as Michael groggily sat up from the couch, directly aligning his body in Emma's sightline above. "Michael! Move, baby!" Jane lunged frantically for their bleary son. But Emma swung her muscular child's arm down hard, face alight with wild exhilaration and promises of flesh rendered by her own sister's hands. The heavy crystal split Michael's temple in a burst of hot crimson. His slight body crumpled to the floor at Jane's feet. Ruth's piercing scream echoed Tom's horrified yell, watching red spill from their son's slack face. Vaulting furniture, Tom sprinted for the staircase, reckless with panic. "Michael! No, 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 God, please!" Behind him, Jane collapsed over Michael's body, ragged sobs mixing with mad cackles from Emma's elevated perch. Ruth fled upstairs, cradling wailing baby Hannah just as Tom grappled onto lower rungs. Ascending urgently, he grappled for Emma's ankle to tug her down safely. But she kicked out like a feral animal, sharp heel clipping his eyebrow. "You can't have me again. I like it out here." Demented delight strained her young voice. "Now my words hold power through mortal deeds. All will weep crimson at my feet. We will devour family flesh to savor our freedom." She raised the geode high once more as Jane tried staunching Michael's bleeding head. Grin twisting with inhuman malice, Emma peered down through the crystal's smooth orb directly at her keening mother. Chapter 5. Tom scrambled up another ladder rung, lungs burning. He grappled desperately for Emma's shifting legs, but she danced easily off reach despite hysterical giggles. Behind them, Michael's blood continued dripping sickeningly as Jane sobbed over his crumpled form. Fixed on Michael and Jane, Emma didn't notice little Anna rousing on the couch beneath her perch. Bleary eyes landing on the geode clutched in Emma's grasp directly over their mother, Anna inhaled sharply, then did the last thing anyone expected. She screamed. The piercing cry jolted Emma from her murderous focus. She flinched, crystal edge fumbling in her hand. Seizing the distraction, Tom hooked an arm through the ladder rails to free one hand. He snagged Emma's ankle fiercely before she could dodge away. "No. Let me go." She thrashed and kicked, but Tom refused to release his iron grip. Ruth came barreling back down the stairs to sweep Anna off the sofa out of reach. With an almighty heave, Tom wrenched Emma off the shelves. They crashed together onto scattered board games as Jane continued hunching over Michael, pleading desperately for him to open his eyes. "Ruth, call 911. Gasping, Tom pinned Emma's limbs in a bear hug despite her shrieking curses. Tiny teeth gnashed just shy of his restraining arms. Wordlessly, Ruth transferred whimpering Anna onto Tom's immobilizing lap beside her sister. She leapt for the phone, punching emergency digits with shaking hands. Within minutes, sirens screamed ever closer through the sleepy neighborhood, then a deafening Commodore blared from the driveway announcing cavalry had arrived. Minutes blurred as uniformed boots pounded down basement steps, taking in the incongruous scene: a deranged child splattered in her brother's blood, surrounded by frantic adults and sheltered younger siblings, all still in pajamas on Christmas morning. Paramedics swiftly descended to evaluate Michael's worrisome head trauma while officers helped Tom wrestle manic Emma toward restraints. Her curses slurred, less intelligible between hysterical cries about injustice. Finally, Tom managed bundling both girls safely aside so medics could maneuver Michael's stretcher upstairs. As they strapped oxygen over his ashen face, Jane hovered close behind, rattling off vitals and symptoms with remarkable focus given her emotional turmoil. She kept shaking hands pressed hard over Michael's crimson-soaked bandage. Clearly recognizing Jane's nursing scrubs and familiarity with protocol, paramedics quickly yielded to her natural authority. Soon the stretcher disappeared out Ruth's front door en route to urgent surgery, Jane clinging beside it inside the screaming ambulance. Collapsed on Ruth's blood-stained carpet, Tom dropped his pounding skull into his hands as reality crashed down. Emma's high cold giggles still echoed through distant corners of his psyche, unraveling in smoke. Hours later, Tom paused outside the pediatric psych ward, steeling his nerve. Ruth had offered keeping shell-shocked Anna indefinitely while the immediate crisis stabilized. But Emma required more complicated handling. Police had been reluctant restraining a small child at first despite her violent struggle. But officer eyes widened as her unhinged screams turned guttural about body dismemberment. They swiftly transferred Emma from holding to hospital care instead for everyone's safety. Now stale air and industrial lighting wrapped Tom in asynchronous privilege of moving freely beyond the security checkpoint. He watched nurses buzz purposefully about their hourlies, gracious to exit unshackled when his own flesh and blood required heavy monitoring just down the hall. Approaching Emma's room, Tom peered through wire-reinforced glass. Inside, soft pastel walls and bolted furniture mismatched the strained scene. Emma lay strapped by wrists and ankles to a central raised bed. She spotted her father instantly despite orderly distractions, face contorting. Loud knocks made Tom flinch before he registered his own fist hammering the plexiglass. An orderly crossed over to unlock the heavy door with low patient warnings. Edging inside, Tom drank in Emma's disheveled hospital gown and chaotic dark curls splayed in all directions. Agitated holdfasts limited how close he could approach without risk. But God, how he yearned to cradle Emma, gently promising everything would be okay. That daddy was here now. That this was all some hideous mistake. Instead, Tom lowered into a bedside chair cautiously while Emma strained against thick wrist straps. "Why am I tied up?" she demanded, chin trembling. "You know I don't like being trapped. Make them stop, I can't move." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Emma's panicked gaze tracked the silent orderly reclaiming his observation perch by the door. "Sir, for safety reasons, I must request you don't touch or loosen restraints." "I know the damn procedure." Tom scrubbed both hands down his face, sighing raggedly at the floor. Just give me a few minutes with my kid, please. You can watch the whole time. I won't mess with anything." He kept his tone civil, barely meeting the man's assessing stare. After an uncomfortably long beat, the scrubs turned back toward wire-reinforced glass, appearing to resume routine monitoring. Alone in fractured intimacy, Tom returned attention to Emma, softly weeping despite thick straps creaking from her agitated writhing. He leaned forward, allowing his hand to hover gently over her clenched fist, thumb tracing the pink stars on her hospital band. Fatherly caresses stopped short by such sterile denial. "Oh baby, I'm so sorry." Tom's whisper hitched. "Daddy promises you'll get all better soon. Then no more scary belts holding you down." Emma watched him uncertainly until anger rekindled, blazing righteously across her young features. "You could take them off now. I already told the doctors I'm calm." She thrashed harder against unyielding binds, face reddening. "I just want free so I can explain what that ornament was saying to me. But no one listens 'cause I'm a kid." Her outrage choked off into helpless sobs. Against his better judgment, Tom carefully freed Emma's twisting wrist long enough to wipe delicate tears off her cheeks. Orderly boots shifted subtly across the room at his defiance, but Tom didn't care. Not when Emma nuzzled into his comforting touch, however fleeting. Exhaling shakily, Tom forced stoic calmness over his cracking heart. "We want to understand, sweet pea, I promise. But hurting Michael was unacceptable. There will have to be consequences until we know you're better." It gutted him admitting such harsh truths aloud about his child's stability. Emma huffed indignantly, pulling away, manic energy regrouping. "It wasn't my fault. That red bulb kept saying mean stuff in my head. Michael was gonna break it 'cause he's a brat." Her eyes narrowed with such unexpected malice. Really, Michael deserved worse. A cold tremor passed through Tom's chest. Emma scowled harder against wrist straps, unrepentant as any hardened criminal. "That evil ornament forced me. But the doctors took it away before I could explain." Sulness overtook her face. "They act like I'm bad or something just 'cause I wanted to show everyone pretty red decorations." She peered up slyly through sooty lashes, and Tom glimpsed the sinister shadow lurking behind those deceivingly childish curls. A monster wearing his precious daughter's skin like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Swallowing bile, Tom rose woodenly. He couldn't bear meeting Emma's suddenly too bright gaze another second. Backing away, he gestured apology toward the door, throat working. "I'm sorry, sir, let's please exit. She needs rest without upsetting stimulation right now." Nodding, the scrubs keyed them out without a word. But over one shoulder Tom glimpsed Emma snarl after him against restraints, unsettling his soul like a brutal holiday specter. That night Tom barely slept. He lay staring at Ruth's guest room ceiling fan spinning endlessly like fragmented memories. Emma's sweet face and joyful laugh over family game nights, the savage possessed creature unleashing violence he feared would haunt his dreams forever. When pale dawn finally filtered around blackout curtains, Tom drifted downstairs craving distraction. Through the front window he noticed several patrol units still lingering down their snowy street. Evergreen Hills remained unnaturally quiet in the early hour, disrupted only by radio-dispatched calls and routine civilian car flow. Briefly Tom considered walking to Kringle and Amp, demanding answers at gunpoint if needed. It was a stupid, reckless impulse, but God, the fury roiling his guts longed for a target. Someone to blame for appending his entire family. Exhaling slowly, Tom turned toward the smell of fresh coffee. He found Ruth in flannel pajamas pouring 2 mugs at the counter, clearly having slept no better. Silently she nudged 1 cup toward Tom. He managed a thin, grateful smile. Steam swirled aromatic between them until Ruth cleared her throat gently. "Any word on Michael?" Tom shook his head, sighing. Last update was he's stable in the ICU. No major bleeding or clots they could find. Just watching for swelling impacting brain function. He blinked rapidly against lancing grief and worry. Ruth touched his wrist. Hey. He's young and so resilient. Odds are Michael will pull through 100%, I'm sure of it. She attempted bolstering confidence despite her own obvious unrest. Tom scrubbed both hands down his face, attempting composure. God, I hope so. Jane hasn't left his side. I should head over in a bit myself. He grimaced into his mug. Visiting Emma had provided no comfort either. Ruth frowned, clearly debating her next words. What did the doctor say? About why Emma? She trailed off helplessly. Bitter acid burned Tom's throat. He shook his head in short jerks. Nothing definite yet. Running labs and psych testing. But they had me recount her behavior changes this past month. He hesitated, unsure whether to mention the supernatural ornament suspicion aloud again. Even to Ruth it sounded ludicrous despite witnessing firsthand how deranged Emma turned. Oblivious to Tom's inner debate, Ruth crossed her arms with a shiver. It's all just so frightening. We see awful things in the ER, but having violence hit your own family. She stared into swirling coffee. Makes you worry what darkness might be lurking in anyone's mind, even those we love. A heavy silence hung between them. Tom's thoughts turned inward, grappling the uncomfortable question. Wondering whether something rotten had secretly tainted wholesome Emma long before. That damn ornament entered their lives. The private moment stretched until a cell phone buzzed loudly across granite countertops. Flinching slightly, Ruth glanced at the incoming name. Oh. It's Jane. She answered quickly. Hey sweetie, how are? Ruth halted, spine snapping straight. Eyes blew wide as incongruous information registered from the tiny speaker. Alarmed, Tom leaned in, trying to interpret Jane's inaudible flood of distraught words. Ruth held up one finger, signaling patience. Wait, slow down, I can't understand. They what? The nurses. Confusion creased Ruth's expression hearing Jane's story. Why would the staff just leave? Hospital regulations don't allow. Dread knotted Tom's stomach, watching Ruth shake her head in disbelief. Hold on, it cut out. You're breaking up, honey. Ruth wandered toward the living room, holding her cell aloft, trying to recover lost signal. Behind the giant Christmas fur, her voice tightened, responding. What do you mean all the patients are gone? Chapter 6. Tom stared at Ruth's back, pulse accelerating. Her confusion and alarm ratcheted his own dread exponentially by the second. Oblivious, Ruth paced a short line, clutching her phone tighter. Jane. You still there? Only muffled static replied. Ruth cursed, pulling the device down to jab hopeless buttons. Tom crossed over urgently. What's happening? Where the hell did the hospital staff and patients go? His mind raced wild, imagining Emma escaping custody, on the loose with violent eyes wide shut mania. Looking up, Ruth hesitated. Clearly she was still processing baffling details herself. I don't know exactly. The call kept cutting out, but Jane said Michael's room was inexplicably empty. No doctors or nurses responding to the alert button either. Tom shook his head in disbelief. What, everyone just abandoned critical care patients without notice? That's absurdly illegal. Dread gnawed his innards, picturing vulnerable little Michael waking alone and injured. Ruth touched his arm gently. Hey, I'm sure there's some reasonable explanation. Jane mentioned finding other units deserted too, though. She was heading to security to sort out the situation, so. Abrupt pounding vibrated the front door, cutting her off mid-sentence. Exchanging startled looks with Ruth, Tom crossed quickly to glance through the eye-hole. Jane stood wild-eyed on the snowy welcome mat, one hand still raised to keep knocking. Relief crashed through him as Tom unlatched the barrier hastily. "Jane! Thank God, we were just worried something." He halted abruptly, realizing Jane wasn't alone. At least 20 random strangers clustered near Ruth's front steps behind her, dead-eyed families and bewildered seniors all squinting vacantly against the brightness. Most wore variations of patient scrubs or flimsy hospital gowns, clearly having just wandered outside into Michigan's harsh winter. Confused, Tom helped pull shivering Jane inside by the elbow. Ruth rushed to crank thermostats warmer as everyone filtered silently into her living room. The random group took no notice, ambling almost drunkenly until they stood shoulder to shoulder. Glazed eyes fixed forward on Ruth's glittering Christmas tree, skin nearly blue from deadly cold. Slamming the door against snow flurries and stupefied surprise, Tom gripped Jane's shoulders urgently. "Sweetheart, what happened? Are you okay?" Jane nodded jerkily, dark curls escaping her messy bun. She hugged herself tight, gaze bouncing oddly to the window. "Yeah, I am fine. I was just so scared when Michael's monitors flatlined, but then he vanished. Everyone did. The whole ward was just empty." Her voice broke asphyxiated. Tom smoothed Jane's hair, his own alarm rising. "Ruth said you found all hospital units deserted? Even their vehicles still parked outside?" At Jane's jerky nod, his eyes narrowed gravely. "What the hell is going on here?" Before Jane could reply, Ruth gently took her arm. "Jane sweetie, let's get you warmed up, yeah. I'll make tea." Shooting Tom a significant look, she guided Jane toward the kitchen, casting uneasy glances at their listless house guests. Brow furrowed, Tom eyed the random assembly swaying before giant glittering fir branches. Their slack faces reflected twinkling multicolored rays almost worshipfully. But not a single mouth hung agape or blinked at the bizarre circumstances. Just glazed hungry eyes fixed forward and shallow chilled breathing, like a room full of walking comatose. Unnerved, Tom edged toward an elderly woman and attempted shaking her gently. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" She didn't acknowledge him, thin hospital gown rippling as her torso tilted slowly back and forth, back and forth. Tom snapped firmer. "Ma'am, do you need assistance?" The senior made no indication of even hearing Tom. Growing desperate, he gripped her bony shoulders more forcefully until the momentum made her face him directly with a startled squeak. But the elderly eyes remained clouded and confused, peering through Tom instead of at him. She merely resumed swaying toward Ruth's dazzling tree soon as he released her grip. Swiping both hands roughly down his stubbled cheeks, Tom suppressed a growing panic attack. Asterisk, this cannot be happening. It's not possible, asterisk. Yet nearly 24 impossible strangers cluttered Ruth's living room in lifeless thrall to a damn Christmas tree on the coldest day of the year so far. Frustrated, Tom stormed toward the kitchen just as Ruth pressed a warm mug into Jane's hands. He glimpsed their questioning faces and gestured sharply. "We need to call for backup now. I just tried rousing people to ask what happened at the hospital and it's like addressing zombies." An edge of hysteria strained his hushed voice. "They won't respond or even make eye contact no matter what I do." Ruth and Jane peered toward the expansive snowy window where listless bodies swayed rhythmically against the dawn light. Unease creased Jane's expression as she searched their oblivious faces. "You're right. It's like they're sleepwalking or something, but with eyes wide open." She shuddered, grasping her tea for warmth. "The whole hospital was that way when I went looking for Michael. Just empty halls and creepy music echoing from somewhere." Tom stiffened, pulse quickening. "Music? What kind of music?" At Jane's hesitant squint trying to recall, he pressed more firmly. Think, was it familiar Christmas tunes, or maybe something more obscure and odd? His mind raced back to invasive whispering lyrics needling endlessly during sleepless nights. Brow-furrowing Jane slowly shook her head. Honestly, I was so focused finding Michael I kind of tuned it all out. She peeked again toward swaying Patience. But now that you mention it, I remember thinking the song didn't sound quite normal, somehow. She hugged herself with a bone-deep shudder. Ruth and Tom exchanged chilling looks in the silence. Neither wanted voicing the impossible thought solidifying between them, that whatever sinister force had possessed Emma somehow now enthralled dozens more innocent people and maybe an entire abandoned hospital. Tom broke the tense quiet first, jaw clenched. We need to phone this in immediately. Clearly some dangerous psychosis is shifting through town fast. He turned toward Ruth's wall phone but halted as Jane suddenly gripped his wrist with a gasp. Oh God, Tom! Her horrified tone made his stomach drop. Slowly Tom followed Jane's pointing finger toward the living room window, as at least 50 more people in equally sheer attire emerged silently from the bare woods bordering Ruth's backyard. They shuffled stiffly through snow drifts almost 6 feet tall, completely indifferent to deadly conditions, wearing just flimsy hospital scrubs and gowns. All faces trained forward seeking warmth and glittering fir tree radiance. Mindlessly they just kept coming en masse from all directions like an actual zombie film. Drawn by invisible forces luring them toward Ruth's bright window beacon. Jesus! Tom staggered back, pulse hammering at the impossible sight. Where the hell did they come from? I don't know. Ruth's stunned reply echoed distantly in his ear. Because deep within Tom's chest, true frightened realization took hold that this waking nightmare could likely trace straight back to his own home somehow. Back to the dark malignant force controlling his daughter, released by one blood crimson Christmas bulb. Chapter 7. Tom stood paralyzed watching nearly 100 people swarm Ruth's snowy yard seeking tree light salvation. Most shuffled obliviously past parked patrol units still flashing red and blue through frosted windows. None bothered responding to blaring sirens mere yards away in their mindless quest toward Fir Tree Sanctuary. Behind Tom, Jane clasped Ruth's shoulders with visible effort to ground her own spiraling hysteria. Oh God, what is happening? We need to blockade the doors. Ruth just kept shaking her head in stunned denial, knuckles bleach white around her mug handle. There's too many. We'd never keep them all out. Tom mentally grappled for emergency logic through his own comprehension crisis. Think. Okay, locking down isn't an option with so many bodies willing to trample us. He raked a hand roughly through his hair, exhaling hard. We need to get underground where there's concrete on all sides. Grab essentials in case utilities get compromised. Galvanized by his lead, Jane and Ruth leapt into action without hesitation. Soon the trio hurriedly descended basement steps single file laden with children's blankets, bottled water, flashlights, a first aid kit and non-perishable snacks. Through small rectangular windows, Tom noted the sun now hovering just above snow-capped pines heralding late dawn. He drew the blackout curtains tightly, mind still reeling at the mass exodus from rational existence engulfing their town. Behind him Jane secured both blanket handles over steel hooks, sealing off the basement from ground-level access. Her breathing came fast and ragged like their own private air supply lay finite and endangered. She flinched when Tom grasped her hands gently. Hey, try to breathe with me, hon, we're safe down here. He pulled Jane close, exaggerating slow chest rises until her exhales steadied in rhythm. Ruth dimmed dangling light bulbs to further obscure their location as 3 adults huddled atop a mattress pile in the corner farthest below street view. Muffled footsteps creaked faintly across floors above through the deepening morning. Even Ruth's muffled voice held barely contained hysteria. I don't understand where they're all coming from or what's making people act this way." She swiped both hands down her face. "I mean, it's like invasion of the body snatchers out there or something." Jane shuddered. "God, I wish I knew details from the hospital to explain it. Other than no staff being on site and creepy choral music everywhere." She trailed off helplessly. Profound silence clung for several taut heartbeats. Then Ruth inhaled sharply, lifting her face with fragile hope. "Wait. Jane, you still have access badges, right? To clinical administration?" Squinting, Jane produced her lanyard ID from inside one coat pocket. Ruth clasped it urgently. "These high-level badges allow remote access to all networked hospital systems. My girlfriend Amy works in IT and showed me how once over drinks. If the security servers are still online, maybe we can view internal footage and piece together what the hell happened." Tom sat bolt upright. "Ruth, you're brilliant." "Here, he tugged his smartphone from another blanket fold, waking the screen. "Try logging in from my device. It's worth a shot." With nothing left to lose, the trio crowded close over trembling hands. Breaths held tight, they watched Ruth navigate clinicians-only software, including live-feed cameras stationed throughout all wards. She toggled quickly through various deserted halls and vacant nurse stations until paralyzed bodies came into view. Because impossibly, nearly 100 men, women and children lay collapsed atop shiny corridors in a bizarre twisted mosaic. Motionless as statues mid-crawl. Overflow formed a macabre living carpet trailing between more bodies slumped half inside rooms, the entire fourth-floor ICU completely obscured by frozen limbs and slack heads, all facing Ruth's basement refuge north. "Oh my God!" Jane's strangled whisper pierced the screen's glow as all three stared round-eyed. "We're seeing this right. I'm not hallucinating." "No." Ruth slowly panned side to side, documenting the entire ward, breathing unsteadily. This is very real. Jesus Christ." Tom scrubbed both hands down his face, pulse racing. "Have they been drugged or something against their will?" Ruth zoomed in on a petite nurse whose body lay partially wedged inside a utility room. Just her legs and one arm remained visible, but even magnified on screen, not a single voluntary muscle twitch disturbed her awkward pose. "I don't know." Ruth's voice sounded choked. "Their eyes are all wide open. This looks like mass paralysis while fully conscious." She glanced up gravely. "I can't even imagine the panic they must be experiencing mentally." Shivering violently, Jane pointed toward scrolling updates on one corner monitor indicating anomaly life support measures. "Wait, look. It says respiratory functions and heartbeats are perfectly maintained out there." Her finger tapped glass urgently. "So they are alive. We have to help them." But Tom gripped her wrist gently. "Hold on. We have zero understanding what danger put them like this in the first place. Could be an airborne agent or something still circulating." He held Jane's desperate eyes intently. "I won't risk exposing us until we know exactly what happened here." Shoulders slumping, Jane relented with visible effort. Ruth resumed slowly scrolling through more screens until something made her freeze abruptly. "Oh no. No, no." Her breathless tone pierced straight through Tom's chest. Gripping Ruth's shoulder, he stared closer at familiar pediatric floor graphics glowing back sterile and deserted. Foreboding flooded his veins, realizing why she sounded so distraught. Because there, buffered on pause amid all the madness, lay Emma's small motionless body peeking just outside her room. Still strapped to a restraint bed, somehow having journeyed this impossibly far. Tom gaped at his daughter's slack profile framed inside the small screen. Disheveled dark curls fanned across white tiles so like the peaceful child he kissed goodnight only weeks earlier before their lives shattered. Stolen away by forces beyond comprehension. He distantly felt Jane grip his hand, heard her ragged exhale shredding the vacuum silence. "Oh God, Emma." Jane's anguished whisper funneled all their spiraling fears into 2 broken syllables. She gripped Ruth's sleeve with her free hand, wide eyes pleading. Is she breathing too? Please, Ruth. We have to know." Nodding, Ruth tapped more keys until shots filled the monitor solely of Emma's still form. Sure enough, the gentle rhythm of breaths lifted her bracelet-banded wrists fractionally in regular sequence. Weak relief shuddered through Tom as 3 pairs of eyes absorbed visual proof his daughter persisted beyond the veil of darkness seeking to smother their entire community. "Okay." Ruth twisted back around, expression set with new authority. "Now that we confirmed physiology is maintained out there, our next step is getting responders on scene immediately." Her rapid taps opened a call icon linked directly through Jane's admin credentials. Holding her breath, Ruth selected Evergreen Hills Police Chief dial-up. Static filled the small speaker for several endless rings. Until finally a breathless voice answered. "Parkersville Police, Chief Campbell." Joy exploded across Ruth's face, realizing he too still had faculties. "Oh, thank God. Chief, this is Nurse Ruth Hudson over on Maple Street. Please send all available units to our local hospital right away, code triage." "Whoa, slow down ma'am." The chief's puzzled drawl reminded Tom of volunteers who directed festival parking near the riverfront each summer. Kindly authority trying to sort benign chaos. Not this. "Did you say Maple Street?" "Sorry, but we got no jurisdiction in your town." "Now what's the nature of this code triage?" Confused, Ruth explained mass open-eyed paralysis overtaking the entire facility somehow. But Chief Campbell made no sound of alarm. Well, alrighty then, I'll certainly radio it down the chain. Meantime, mind calling your own local PD to sort things out in Evergreen Hills?" Mouth falling open, Ruth turned slowly to meet Tom and Jane's equally lost stares. On screen, Emma breathed softly in horrific juxtaposition of civility and hell breaking loose. Tom gently took the cell phone from Ruth's limp fingers. "Sir, this is Tom Johnson. We can't reach any authorities from our town who should be first response. Please, dozens of vulnerable people including my young daughter need rescue from whatever forces overtook that hospital. You must have jurisdictional partnership to assist until we regain control locally." "Yeah, that does sound mighty disturbing." Chief Campbell audibly sipped something on his end. "But like I told the nurse fella, we got no authority sending in Parkersville squad cars all the way over there. I truly do wish y'all luck though. Maybe try the state police if no one local picks up. Have a good one." The line went dead. Utter silence engulfed their cellar sanctuary, more deafening than the hordes ascending above. Tom stared at Ruth and Jane, connecting the only possible dots left amidst so much senseless chaos. "It's not just contained here," he uttered woodenly. "Whatever's happening has spread everywhere by now." Chapter 8. A profound stillness followed Tom's chilling realization as 3 sets of eyes remained locked in growing dread. What are you saying?" Jane's timorous whisper barely stirred the air. This madness somehow reached beyond Evergreen Hills already." Tom scratched his jaw, thoughts spinning darkly. "You heard the Parkersville chief. He acted completely oblivious about a hospital full of bodies paralyzed and dying right on his doorstep. He began pacing the small dungeon space, pulse quickening. I think maybe whatever possessed Emma and those people upstairs to worship the Christmas tree has now spread through God knows how many more victims." He halted, facing Jane and Ruth's round-eyed stares. Which means nowhere is safe anymore until we understand how to fight this thing. Nobody moved, the concept too enormous and terrifying to grasp. Until Ruth visibly steeled herself with a brisk head shake. Okay. Okay, we can't lose focus. She inhaled sharply, expression setting with firm determination. Let me try the state police emergency line. Surely other regions have mobilized SWAT or National Guard units by now if this is as widespread as you say. Nodding, Jane straightened also, frazzled curls escaping her bun. And I should attempt contacting hospital administration again in case anyone else got free like I did. She worried her lip. Maybe we can piece together onset clues if I can reach staff who haven't turned yet. Emboldened by having a constructive plan, Ruth passed back Tom's cell. Both women began dialing intently while Tom watched their bravely neutral facades start crumbling again as each call failed connecting. Bile burned his throat, realizing as minutes stretched on just how alone and unprotected they now stood before this unspeakable swell rising all around. Remarkable women who were pillars of the community, now cracked and afraid, relying on him, an accountant who scrambled his taxes annually, to try mitigating Snowpiercer run amok. The scenario's sheer madness suddenly crushed Tom in an overwhelming wave. Chest heaving, he braced himself against icy concrete walls, trying to reclaim scattered composure. Until Jane gripped his shoulders urgently. Hey, Hui, look at me. Their locked gaze anchored his wheezing lungs. We are going to figure this out, Tom. But I need you. So just breathe with me, okay? Inhaling slow and deep, Jane cradled his cheek tenderly. Tom allowed the steadying lifeline to buoy him back from the choking abyss, forced air through burning lungs in sync with her exaggerated pace, envisioning quiet date nights and joyful memories that seemed centuries divorced from this visceral nightmare. Gradually Tom's vision cleared. He managed a jerky nod, half laughing through residual adrenaline tremors. Well, definitely no panic attacks on my bingo card this morning. Attempting levity eased their emotional pressure valve slightly. Ruth touched Tom's shoulder, hesitant hope gleaming. Sorry to say the state police may be a no-go too, their emergency circuit just rings and rings. She worried her lip. But Tom's earlier theory does seem more and more probable. I think we need accepting this thing has gone statewide at least. Shoulders slumping, Jane entwined Tom's hand tightly. God help us all if you're right. No one spoke, the chilling thought screaming louder by the second, that within hours or days, whatever supernatural contagion possessed their daughter and neighbors could feasibly overrun the entire nation. Eventually Ruth cleared her throat gently. So where does that leave us? With Plan A foiled, reaching first responders, we clearly need a whole new strategy. That piercing question jarred Tom from cold defeat creeping back in. He mentally flailed for their next logical move. Think. Emotion is noise now. What shred of reason stands between us and the snarling abyss? Just then a loud thump directly above their heads made all three adults jump. They stared upwards as more muffled shuffles permeated the ceiling, the creaking weight of too many footsteps to count just one floor removed now. Jane clasped Tom's hand impossibly tighter, barely breathing. Gaze locked overhead, Tom racked his brain reviewing limited intel gathered so far, Emma's initial fixation on the blood-red ornament, the hospital crowd's equally magnetic attraction worshipping Ruth's dazzling Christmas tree, both symbols of evergreen life and light-piercing winter's barren death grip. Piecing fragments slowly, Tom dropped his focus back to two women awaiting some scrap of direction. Anything to push back the gnashing darkness. Guys, I think to fight this, first we need understanding the liver root connecting everything. He glanced evenly between their puzzled frowns. Jane, you witnessed the hospital mob migrating blindly through deadly snow on foot from who knows where. Now clearly more gather here the same way, he gestured upward, indicating the creaking footsteps. Trees seem symbolic somehow. And Emma, our sweet rational girl, became completely obsessed by that damn blood-red ornament. Tom shook his head sharply, more theories congealing. I still believe that thing from Kringle's shop was the initial catalyst poisoning her mind. But now whatever evil it carries has grown independently. Passed into God knows how many more victims by some psychic contagion. He squeezed Jane's trembling hand, holding her frightened eyes. So our only hope stopping this is getting to the source. We must find where it all originated and destroy it. Stunned silence met his daring proposition. Then Ruth laughed without mirth, borderline hysterical. Just walk out into the zombie alien invasion and fight our way upstream through hordes attracted to trees. She flung one arm wildly above their heads where legions of footsteps now thundered ominously. That's your survival plan? Jane chewed her thumbnail with vigor. Eyes bounced rapidly back and forth in thought until finally meeting Tom's level stare. The Christmas tree, she uttered softly. Emma, and the hospital crowd. They all ended up fixated on an evergreen first. She shrugged faintly. Seems our only potential lead right now. Incredulous Ruth dragged both hands down her face but reluctantly nodded too. Okay fine, the hell with it. Clearly Einstein logic won't apply anymore here. If murder trees are where this nightmare spawned, then we follow the gory breadcrumbs. She sniffed sharply. Guess my landscaping cult days finally proved good for something. Brief laughter released some taut anxiety. Tom gripped Ruth and Jane's hands, new fortitude burning in his chest. All right then ladies, we have our heading. He gestured upward, indicating the heavy footsteps now migrating across floors from front to back in a disconcerting flow. Seeking refuge behind paper-thin cellar walls. Let's grab essentials and move out quick through the garage before we get pinned down here completely. Ruth arched one brow skeptically hearing his brazen tactical assessment. But she also strode toward shelves lining the walls and began tossing heavy blankets, first aid supplies and flashlights into a large duffel bag. Jane quickly snatched her clinician lanyard off the folding table. Tucking it securely inside her coat, she squeezed Tom's shoulder passing by. Unspoken emotion flashed briefly across her face before Jane cinched her hair back tighter and hoisted 2 sloshing water canteens without hesitation. United by audacious resolve, 3 ordinary citizens turned to ascend basement steps bearing what little provisions they had, bracing to plunge headlong toward the bloodthirsty heart of a nightmare none could have ever imagined just one short week before Christmas Day. Chapter 9. Heart hammering, Tom eased open the basement door at the top of the stairs. Early morning light filtered across Ruth's abandoned living room. Muted footsteps continued shuffling overhead, making pinewood rafters creak. Peering around the doorframe first, Tom scanned their path toward the kitchen and garage access. Coast remained clear for now. He gestured sharply for Ruth and Jane to follow quickly. Passing boarded windows, all 3 noted the drive now choked by emergency response vehicles blocking them in completely. Strobing police lights silently illuminated dozens of wandering hospital staff bumping listlessly against cruisers in their single-minded quest southward. Toward Fir Needles. Tom gripped Jane's clammy hand crossing through the deserted kitchen. At the side door beside Ruth's mudroom he pointed above the wall hook mounts. Ruth, can you disengage the garage door opener? Then help me manually lift. Nodding she stretched upward and tugged the electronic switch off its track as Tom and Jane moved into position bracing elbows beneath the heavy wooden panels. Ruth added her strength on one side allowing just enough lift for bodies to narrowly slip underneath into the attached garage space beyond. Cold concrete met their shoes on the oil-stained floor. All 3 spun quickly, struggling to disengage the awkward door without crushing wandering hands and feet now groping blindly around all sides of the house. Attracted by their fleeing motion and noise like zombies to fresh meat. With immense effort they managed lowering the side entrance on the wrists and ankles of 2 hospital orderlies, eliciting dull surprised shouts. "Hurry!" Gasping, Tom sprang toward Ruth's Toyota. Yanking the back hatch, he began shoving their supply bag inside just as more disembodied hands appeared underneath, seeking prey. On his right, Ruth was already sliding behind the driver wheel, twisting keys in the ignition. The sedan rumbled to growling life. Jane leapt into the passenger seat, slamming her door just as fingernails scraped loud across wet steel. Lunging inside and whirling to grip his hatch handle tight, Tom shouted, "Punch it now," before he even had both legs fully within shelter. Ruth floored the gas pedal, lurching them forward through the tight quarters windowless walls provided. Behind them, dragging limbs smashed painfully where moments earlier living skulls had occupied space. Sunlight and snow blindness slammed their faces as Ruth nearly clipped the closed garage drainage gate. Slewing sideways, she stomped the brakes against strained seatbelts, all 3 panting wildly. The Toyota idled perpendicular, having narrowly escaped confinement by matter of seconds. Ruth white-knuckled the wheel, getting bearings. Squinting ahead through the bright snow glare, all they could discern was huddled forms shuffling steadily down the middle of streets between parked vehicles. Converging inland toward the commercial district, and looming evergreens beyond. Tom gripped Ruth's shoulder, adrenaline and fear compounding raw senses. "Okay, I think we're clear of the thickest mobs here. Let's loop catty-corner toward downtown and stay alert." Jaw-clenched, Ruth navigated forward through the icy ruts their driveway hadn't seen plow service to clear yet. No road crews would ever come again. Weaving slowly, they trailed the growing masses at a distance, breath-fogging windows. The 3 tracked their path past the glow of the Evers shopping complex, drawing more ambling forms outside like a morbid Pied Piper parade. Until bright strobe beams suddenly flashed ahead from one intersecting street. "Wait, stop!" Tom smacked the passenger headrest urgently. Ruth slammed the brakes reflexively as 2 patrol chargers peeled around the corner into view. Light bars lit up the snowy morning, joining their strange convoy. "It's the police." Hopeful Jane gripped Tom's shoulder hard, smiling breathlessly. But her elation visibly dimmed, taking in both sedans' odd trajectory on second glance. They seemed to swerve without purpose down random offshoot roads. Silent guardians no longer patrolling to serve and protect. Tom tracked their meandering path, feeling that hope sink cold in his chest too. Because neither cruiser slowed or acknowledged the sole functioning vehicle in sight. Which could only mean their minds are taken too. Tom turned to meet Jane and Ruth's growing dread. He pointed out how patrol lights illuminated dozens more civilians emerging from shops and offices now. Joining the swelling ranks drifting through winter streets on a mission toward Pines. Ever drawing inward inexorably. Ruth idled them at the intersection, uncertainty gnawing her face. Snow swirled faster, streaking the windshield in hypnotic patterns. Their isolation and exposure suddenly felt crushing. Grim silence thickened until Jane jolted sharply, pointing left toward Kringle's Co. across the plaza. "Wait, the Christmas shop. If that blood-red ornament started everything, maybe clues inside can help us trace the source." Tom's pulse quickened. Brilliant thinking. He nodded Ruth onward eagerly. "Let's search quickly, then get out of sight. We're too vulnerable this exposed." Threading slowly closer between huddled forms, Ruth pulled adjacent to the darkened storefront swallowed by milling bodies. Peering uneasily out cracked windows, Tom marked a path through the oblivious crowd toward one glittering pine flanking Kringle's entrance. Giant evergreen displayed the same flamboyant bulbs and baubles they'd navigated weeks earlier, seeking cheery tree decorations with his unsuspecting family. Bile burned Tom's throat at the visceral reminder of innocent before times. He viciously suppressed pointless longing that only weakened their impossible odds now. Action and answers were all that mattered moving forward, not squandered dreams. Clearing his throat gruffly, Tom unzipped the rear utility pouch storing a tire iron within easy reach. Cold metal grounded his swirling focus. "All right. You two wait here, engine running for quick getaway." Through the foggy glass he met their frightened eyes, managed an encouraging wink that felt foreign on his face. "I'll smash out those front windows and grab anything useful inside, then come straight back, 3 minutes max. Just lay on the horn if our zombie friends out there start noticing snacks have arrived." Neither woman smiled at his weak humor. But Ruth nodded tersely, white-knuckled on the wheel, while Jane worried her lower lip raw. Outside, more innocents continued meandering past boarded storefronts, drawn by an invisible siren song. Bracing himself, Tom eased open the sedan's rear hatch. Ice winds instantly needled his exposed skin like frozen teeth. Battling upstream through the shambling mob, Tom reached numb fingers toward Kringle's entrance pine strung with familiar disturbing bulbs. The hand-carved bloodruns seemed to shift eagerly, sensing his warm presence so near. Chapter 10. Tom's palms registered the cold, intricate carvings across those wooden ornaments dangling just beyond reach. Heart racing, he forced focus toward the abstract task rather than threat of discovery by 100 shuffling pedestrians. Most continued trudging past, seeking more prominent evergreen beacons inland, but Tom gripped his tire iron tighter, noticing several nearby forms turning sluggishly toward shelter potential. Toward him. Now or never, blood pounding in his ears, Tom swung with frenzied precision, once, twice. Glass rained onto the snowy sidewalk, embedding glittering shards across heavy needles. Alarmed voices sounded down the street, coupled by quickening footsteps converging through the flurries. Wasting no time, Tom scrambled up the exterior ledge and slithered inside the jagged opening headfirst. Tumbling to his feet took no effort, riding again in the familiar confines. Flashing strobe lights from approaching cruisers lit up the dark space in sporadic bursts. Tom blinked against residual blown bulbs and branches suspended overhead, taking in untouched seasonal wares lining the single narrow center aisle, a gingerbread confection dream hauntingly preserved beneath silent speakers twined around barren registers. Fragrant pine and long-cooled candle tallows permeated the stale air. Display racks brimming with ghastly expressive nutcrackers stood sentry beside sprawling miniature villages. Always watching, always waiting for another wide-eyed soul to wander through the spider's parlor. Hands shaking violently from adrenaline, Tom rushed toward the rear workshop door behind ornate gift-wrapping stations. Locked tight. Outside, more distant cries echoed over his ramming shoulder, followed by the Toyota's panicked bleating summons. Double damn. Frantically, Tom squeezed behind the front counter, grabbing anything in reach on surrounding shelves, packaged ornaments, associate manuals, shipping forms. He swept an entire corkboard layered with arcane sketches and pest control receipts off one wall into his makeshift satchel. Hissing impatiently, he vaulted back over the registrar just as more shouts sounded right beyond the shattered entrance. Turning quickly, Tom gripped a crowbar off the floor with his other hand. He swung fiercely at the hand-carved display Ruth had admired weeks earlier, knocking dozens of wooden sigils clattering amidst the winter splendor tableau. Satisfied he'd done all damage possible in the vulnerable seconds allowed, Tom gathered up both heavy bags. He turned toward his jagged exit route without hesitation, pulse racing for home-free escape. Which is when Mr. Kringle lunged growling from the shadows behind Tom's flank, catching his throat in a sudden crushing chokehold. "Thought you could rob me blind, eh boy?" Rancid breath hawked wetly by Tom's ear, suspended off the floor. He writhed violently against wiry sinew belying the codger's elderly appearance. Kringle just squeezed harder, words slithering between yellowed teeth. "Reckon it's only fair. seen your soul laid bare weeks ago behind so-called festive cheer. He shook Tom sharply like an animal, spittle flecking one cheek. Such fertile soil you brought me planting evil. But you don't even appreciate the righteous harvest your own hands have sown. Choking Tom clawed desperately at restraining forearms. But already his strength drained dangerously. Kringle bent low over one shoulder with a vile grin. Time someone else reaps their just rewards. Sinister delight swelled palpably, feeling Tom's struggles weaken. Kringle hitched him higher, preparing a final victorious wrenching. Crack, a splitting pain exploded across Tom's cheek. Stunned, Kringle dropped him reflexively. Coughing violently, Tom spun to glimpse Jane wielding the abandoned crowbar, eyes alight with maternal fury. Kringle straightened, screeching profanity, but Ruth appeared, swinging the tire iron next. It connected with the side of his head, sending the aged figure crumpling like a sack of nuts. Both women gripped under Tom's shoulders, half dragging his sagging weight toward daylight. He gulped air desperately, insides heaving. Hazy forms clustered thicker outside, now pounding the sedan's piercing horn. With immense effort, Jane and Ruth managed lifting Tom up and over to collapse gasping beside their supplies. Doors slammed deafeningly, tires peeling out just as hands slapped wetly across the hatchback glass inches from their feet. Then they were roaring away from Kringle's coat back into the flurry whiteout. 1,000 bestial cries followed their retreating tracks until windshield wipers and distance finally drowned the awful chorus. Only Ruth's puffing exhales filled the hurtling vehicle as they sped further from sight. Quivering adrenaline drained rapidly off shock and cold, replaced by a soul-deep weariness. Gradually Tom's choking gasp subsided. He managed hoisting himself upright, every muscle protesting violently. Beside him Jane gripped his fingers so tight both hands tingled. "That was way too close," she uttered shakily, meeting Tom's eyes. "Please tell me you found something useful in there before Kringlesaurus attacked." Tom nearly laughed at her strained humor. Glancing down, he took stock of both overstuffed bags between their feet. Broken bulbs poked dangerously through one corner, but myriad papers and packaging offered promising potential still. Clearing his raw throat carefully, Tom nodded. Yeah, I think so. Grabbed all I could." He lifted the unorthodox satchels with scraped hands. "Let's find somewhere to lay low so I can sort through everything." He glanced questioningly up toward Ruth's tired eyes in the rearview mirror. She gave him a subtle nod without veering off their inland course. Where towering pines loomed ever closer through the swirling snowfall, whispering seductions, beckoning them toward the dark heart of the labyrinth where this waking nightmare was birthed. Chapter 11. Ruth navigated backroads, scanning for shelter options as Tom and Jane sorted hurriedly through his odd cache stolen from Kringle's lair. Broken packaging and manuals proved useless. But Tom quickly became engrossed, examining dozens of cryptic shipping logs and chemical lists. These cargo forms track incoming inventory for the last 6 months at least. Tom shook his head, minutely decoding faded stamps and signatures. Most goods trace back to some warehouse distributor in Central Europe. But others. He trailed off, thoughtfully turning over an envelope hand-labeled for Mr. Kringle's special Yuletide stock. Faded return address showed the International Forestry Institute in Alaska. Jane read over his shoulder, scowling. A research lab sent weird Christmas stuff. Why? Exactly. Tom's eyes narrowed, thoughts churning. He folded away the mysterious package carefully atop a detailed pest elimination schedule. "I wanna investigate this institute later. Could be they supplied our infamous blood ornament that kicked everything off. But right now we need..." There. Ruth's sharp tone broke his musing. She slowed them toward an isolated property at the forest's edge where cultivated pine rows ended abruptly against tangled deadfall. A weathered for sale sign hung crookedly beside a weed-choked gravel drive. Nodding decisively, Ruth turned down the overgrown lane toward a ramshackle barn and small cabin, both swallowed from sight by snowy overgrowth. She shifted into park behind sprawling empty animal enclosures. "We can hole up in this cottage a while, seems long abandoned." Ruth eyed the snowy bunker grade A location. No lights or smoke that might attract more wannabe Christmas trees. They traipsed up a shovel-scraped walkway single file. A quick sweep inside the musty interior revealed a modest open living space adjoining a wood stove kitchen and single back bedroom. All furniture remained covered beneath moldy white sheets. Abandoned indeed, hopefully by both previous occupants and present paranormal predators outside. After securing every entrance from bizarre invasion, all three reconvened around Ruth's camp light atop the kitchenette's lone table. She had discovered both garage and woodshed stocked with firewood, now working to spark tinder in the antique stove hearth. Meanwhile, Tom examined more odd papers and sketches retrieved from under Kringle's counter. Most appeared nonsensical, rambling notes about optimal winter feeding cycles, arcane symbols paired curiously with basic silviculture terminology. One wrinkled sheet captured Tom's focus longest, showing a childish drawing of fir trees decorated with disturbingly familiar bulbous ornaments. Scraggly letters carefully spelled Saint Nick above a plump figure flying past on a sled pulled by spindly antlered beasts. Tom scrutinized the strange creatures more closely, pulse quickening. Because instead of friendly reindeer smiles, the artist had crudely etched jagged fangs inside the mouths of every buck. Heart suddenly hammering, Tom fumbled for another document, the official delivery notice from Alaska's Forestry Institute he'd flagged earlier. Dread congealed deeper, noting the shipping contents now. 1x custom tricholoma pines procured for unique circadian cycles, 2x baguano specimens, redacted, subspecies, 1x mostly intact pictorial woodcut dated 1782, charred, see attached Translation Bureau File 1928 RRA for further scholarly analysis. Guys? Tom waited until Jane and Ruth glanced over, puzzling his sharp tone. He held out both unnerving papers. "Look at these together, I think Kringle was harvesting freakin' black magic trees or something." Jane took the ominous cargo manifest as Ruth came closer, squinting over her shoulder. They scanned wordlessly until Jane tapped the smiling blood-toothed reindeer in pointed comparison. "He's right." She looked between documents, growing paler. "Reindeer and bat fertilizer. This is beyond bizarre." "Hold up." Ruth pointed sharply. "Those tricholoma pine specimens or whatever, they're listed for unique circadian cycles, right? And we already linked trees somehow to this whole hypnosis outbreak." She crossed both arms, gaze turned inward. "So what if that bastard Kringle was dosing pines with, like, ultra-potent lunar cycles or circadian rhythms, priming a psychic influence on humans?" Ruth glanced up grimly. "We keep daylight plant cycles steady year-round for cultivation. But disrupting natural seasonal signals could feasibly trigger unpredictable growth side effects." She dragged both hands down her face at the audacious conclusion. "Christ, Kringle's created a goddamn army of mind-control Christmas trees, drawing people like zombies under some crazy phenomenal spell." Stunned silence followed her outburst. Then Tom dragged one hand roughly through his hair, expelling a sharp, humorless laugh. "I mean, at this point, why the hell not?" He paced away, shaking his head before turning back sharply. "Okay, so we finally have a working theory here, weaponized wintertime with mass brainwashing." Tom scrubbed both hands down his stubbled cheeks roughly, adrenaline spiking with renewed purpose. "Now we just gotta figure out how to blow up the psychological warfare signal source at the roots. Before every living person gets turned into a pine-praising disciples for this eco-terrorist's demented evergreen utopia." He realized his voice climbed near shouting. Tom paused, drawing a deep breath, pulse racing. Ruth straightened from the disturbing paperwork slowly. She gave Tom a long searching look, then Jane, who appeared equally uncertain how to proceed. Finally Ruth crossed both arms. "Well, you two clearly have more experience with the creepy Christmas side of everything." She half smiled despite the grotesque scenario weighing all shoulders now. "What's our next step, captains? Should we go canvass the Nuthouse villagers again for more clues?" Jane sighed, massaging her temples where a headache clearly brewed. She stared down at Emma's motionless face, still buffered on Tom's cracked cell phone screen. "Honestly, I think we have enough chaotic pieces filling in this insane puzzle finally." She glanced hesitantly up. If deranged decorative trees somehow hold the ultimate power source kickstarting this psychic epidemic, devastating that central hive mind seems our only logical target left. Tom managed a sharp, determined nod despite everything inside him recoiling from the clinical framing. Because targeting the core meant locating then destroying the living evergreen pine to which his precious daughter now knelt enthralled amid dead winter needles. Chapter 12. A heavy silence lingered around Ruth's flickering stove flames. Each adult sat trapped in their own swirling thoughts, digesting ugly truths revealed at last. That their entire community, now likely expanding exponentially statewide and beyond, lay enthralled by an infernal arboreal hive mind. Somehow weaponized through dark forces to emit an intoxicating psychic call that helpless human minds could not resist, drawing them inward like moths to their own destruction. A log crumbled loudly within the firebox, snapping everyone back. Jane smoothed tangled curls off her forehead, meeting Tom and Ruth's haunted stares surrounding scribbled clues and cursed cargo lists. All equally reluctant to voice the only feasible solution left despite having no alternatives. Because logically their next step meant locating then destroying the central, queen pine, from which this entire waking nightmare spawned, the conscious tree of life in whose deadly thrall their daughter now rested vulnerable against the soulless earth. Bile seared Tom's throat, imagining Emma's trusting face upturned toward blood-hued glass, obsidian antlers, merciless stellar indifference as one axe swing could cease the precious heartbeat forever. "Okay, well, this is officially above all our pay grades." Ruth's strained half-laugh pierced Tom's anguished memories, threatening to drown rational thought. He inhaled sharply, nodding gratefulness as she continued briskly stacking their enforced clues into a neat pile. "Here's what we know so far." Kringle clearly imported freaky ancient pines and spooky fertilizer to create some kind of twisted Christmas mind control botanical weapon. One finger tallied invisible facts ticking down. Now the whole countryside's population rapidly transforms into walking plant food bags. So plan A of begging outside help is clearly Bupkis. She ignored Jane's flinch at the word choice. Which leaves plan B, Tom axes the heart tree signaling brainwashed drones while Jane and I distract the crowds. Ruth bit her lip anxiously. "Any alternative ideas, folks?" Throat too clenched for words, Tom shook his head curtly without meeting their eyes. Beside him Jane just exhaled unsteadily, cradling her forehead. "No, that's our only option, Ruth." Her voice strained, painfully neutral, as if reading from an arbitrary script. "We must take down their central power source. At any cost." At Jane's strangled emphasis on any, Tom gripped Ruth's shoulder, urgently nodding toward the back bedroom. Excusing themselves from the stifling room, he shut the mildewed door firmly, breaths coming short and jagged. Ruth guided them both down onto sagging mattress springs. Outside wind hissed trancing whispers through snowy evergreens that none could barricade out now. When Tom finally lifted his head, twin tears tracked through days-old stubble. Jaw muscles clenched, holding back an anguished, keen, threatening release from each atom of his being. Wordlessly Ruth pulled him close, her own composure splintering to cradle Tom fiercely as ragged grief finally broke against her shoulder. Guttural sobs tore from his chest in waves, sorrow and rage for their community now damned, his precious daughter condemned by forces no one comprehended, that hope and innocence stood judged against the machinery of uncaring celestial might. Gradually the worst tremor subsided, allowing words to penetrate comfort haze. Ruth stroked Tom's hair gently like soothing a scared child. "Shoo. I know. I'm so sorry, Tom. We're together in this, okay?" Ruth's own voice hitched softly. "But you gotta keep things locked down mentally or we'll lose advantage, yeah?" She pulled back, clasping his damp face tenderly yet firmly. "Stay with us, buddy. Come back now." Tom choked down another ragged exhale. Scrubbing both eyes roughly on his sleeve, he managed a jerky nod. Focused on slowing his air intake against the hurricane swirling faster inside. They sat hunched together on the dusty mattress edge until Tom trusted his voice not to break. He gripped Ruth's hand tightly. "You're right. We all need staying sharp if anyone is getting out alive." Tom inhaled sharply. "I just can't get Emma's face out of my head once we locate their central tree." He shook his own fiercely as if to dislodge the image physically. "Doesn't matter. We do what's required no matter how much I wish things could be different." His tone hardened with icy resolution. "I'll carry the axe that frees our people's minds and cripples Kringle's crazy wish fulfillment factory." He held Ruth's gaze unwavering. "Emma knows her dad loves her beyond life itself. If my life buys her future somehow, fate, worse things exist than that." A heavy beat passed. Then Ruth touched his shoulder, pride and grief both naked on her face. "Your girl's lucky to have a father willing challenging such evil for her. But we're coming out of this together, you hear?" Her sharp tone brooked zero dissent. "We end this nightmare as a family, then get back to that cabin for the best Christmas dinner of our lives." A surprised laugh burst from Tom at the jarring mundane finality. But he embraced the comforting mental image like a life preserver amid the sharks circling ever closer. A soft knock preceded Jane cracking the door hesitantly. "Hey, everything okay in here?" Tom scrubbed both hands down his face quickly, then gestured her inside. Taking Jane's hands, he pulled her down onto his other side, the mattress groaning under their combined weight. But solid presence felt bracing. "Yeah, sorry about that." Tom managed a taut chuckle. "We good now though? Just finalizing strategy, right Ruth?" She nodded confidently, bumping Jane with one shoulder. "Roger that. Phase 1 is we all gear up for a little winter warfare through Kringle's acid wonderland outside." A manic gleam only slightly forced twinkled through her exhaustion. "Maybe raid that creepy workshop out back for axes or whatever, go full shining mode trudging through snowy field of screams." "Jesus, okay honey, this isn't a movie." But Jane laughed weakly at Ruth's dark humor diffusing tension. She met Tom's gaze, eyes still glazed with tears of her own yet jaw set firm. "You really ready to end this curse once they locate the queen tree that started everything?" She searched his face intently. No matter what that means." His heart fractured further hearing the unspoken agony mirrored. But Tom cradled Jane's cold hands to his lips gently. "Yes. I swear no matter how far this psychic cancer spreads, it dies with us tonight." Chapter 13. While Ruth rummaged the abandoned outbuildings under gray clouds, Jane helped Tom strap pruning saws from the derelict barn onto an old wagon. Its rusted steel bed could serve transporting firewood back, or bodies forward into battle. Tom's stomach churned ominously at the grim mental correction. But he staunchly ignored it, securing a gas canister in one corner instead. His breath plumed in icy gusts across the hand tools, anchoring his focus outward. Because their only path threaded straight through a lethal arboreal minefield now to locate and destroy the light-crowned pine signifying their people's thraldom. And Emma's gentle heartbeat flickered somewhere beneath those glittering terminal branches too. Ruth returned blowing on stiff hands, her improvised weapon stash clattering loudly. This creepy old woodshed was jackpot. Check it out. She arranged an entire arsenal across the wagon with satisfaction, 2 long-handled brush axes, various trimming saws, a splitting maul, huge antler-tined hatchet. Tom raised an eyebrow picking up a curved pruning hook. Jesus Ruth, you ransacking for landscaping or medieval battle? Hey, whatever gets the chopping job done, yeah. She shrugged defensively. Once we creep those weaponized specimen pines it'll be war footing through hordes trying to reach the queen. Ruth grimaced, avoiding direct mention of what fate awaited Emma and the other enthralled drones once they succeeded. Clearing her throat briskly she swung the brush axe testing grip. Okay lumberjacks, how we wanna strategize splitting up? Tom leaned both palms onto the icy wagon lip considering. Having an advanced scout seemed wise navigating through the maze of psionic danger zones. But the prospect of separating twisted his guts. I figure you and I take point forging inward on the ground. You're better reading botanical patterns to identify our target tree straight off. Tom tilted one saw toward Jane with an apologetic glance. No offense, but you should hang back here ready as will woman for fast egress once we accomplish the main sabotage. Jane bristled visibly. Now wait, I won't just sit hiding while. Hold up, I have a better idea. Ruth clapped loudly, forestalling the brewing argument. She strode toward her idling sedan, voice echoing across the frozen gravel. This baby's already lifted for snow drifts. Jane drives point plowing through possessed crowds and drawing off crazies, while Tom rides shotgun blasting the trunk sound system. I trail on cross-country skis using downhill speed and agility through the trees. She made roller coaster swoops with one hand, face alight planning their haphazard assault. Tom and Jane blinked after her rapid-fire scenario, then exchanged mutually bemused looks. That could actually work. Tom managed huffing quiet laughter at their ride's matter-of-fact authority. Leave it to Ruth already strategizing transportation logistics flanking snow banks. He swallowed hard to offset renewed anxiety needling his thoughts. Clearing his throat, Tom forced steady eye contact with each extraordinary woman now prepping to plunge headfirst into his family's supernatural disaster. Hey. Thank you both for everything. He gripped Ruth's hand, then Jane's gloved fingers even tighter. I don't deserve such brave friends willing facing literal insane winter wasteland darkness for us. But I swear we end this nightmare today or die trying together. Jane touched his stubbled cheek softly. We're getting our family back and saving this town, Tom. Full stop. Her sharp tone brooked no doubt. Ruth nodded confidently hefting her ski poles onto one shoulder. Together the motley crew turned toward Ruth's idling sedan prepared stretching survival odds beyond reason or safety, all for one little girl's stranded soul many cold miles hence. Snow swirled thicker obscuring their lonely shelter the instant tires pulled from seclusion onto winding access lanes. Through the sparse pine boughs, hundreds more townspeople now trudged toward destiny's call echoing from the frosted heart beyond. Ruth drove slowly, high beams cutting bright swaths through the blizzard. Tom gripped his door handle bracing uneasily while Jane scanned for change in plodding crowd trajectory. There's so many. Her distressed murmur echoed Tom's own creeping panic as endless waves of enthralled civilians filtered past their creeping bumper. Most took no notice, but the odd glazed face registered their loud engine idling curiously. Turn your high beams off. Tom gestured curtly. No point advertising like a damn lighthouse before we locate the heart pine. Ruth obeyed without question. Fog lights alone cast faint illumination highlighting dozens more vacantly questing silhouettes drawn from homes and cars and lives paused indefinitely, all wandering oblivious past familiar street signs and parked patrol units, converging toward the same inevitable vortex ahead. Gradually street lamps tapered out leaving only weak amber glow from store signs behind. Their tires spun slow over compact drifts, following twin ruts toward looming pine groves where darkness reigned complete. The same isolated stand where Tom had taken his unsuspecting family seeking Christmas cheer what seemed an eternity ago. Now the towering firs bristled like nature's sentinels ushering helpless souls toward a frigid eternity under psychedelic boughs. Each decorative glass teardrop or painted heart sworn to lethal secrecy about the sacrifice required tonight. Here. Jane's sharp tone shattered Tom's macabre reflections. She half stood through her open window, one hand extended pointing dead ahead toward a solitary pine adorned with hundreds of winking fairy lights. The brilliant colors seemed painters swirling to form a widening vortex at its peak. Directly before which knelt over 100 townspeople and travelers alike in concentric circles. Worshippers gazing raptly upward, skin bluish from lethal cold. A living sacrifice circle centered around one fertile pine awaiting bloody initiation beneath the solstice stars. And kneeling at its gnarled base against blood-hued glass ornaments rested Emma's small soul-given form. Chapter 14. Emma. Tom's anguished whisper fractured across frozen air. Heart seizing, he fumbled his door open half falling onto icy street ruts. Ruth cursed veering wildly avoiding his staggering boots. Ignoring all else Tom stumbled toward glowing pine boughs beckoning him closer, closer. Emma knelt supplicant with a congregation of equals now, man, woman and child garbed in flimsy gowns and stethoscopes signifying old-world roles shed for the eternal now. About them orbited more unfamiliar devotees in night shift uniforms and hair curlers and holiday sweaters. All gathered irresistibly like steel shavings before this glorious refuge promising rapture under its kindly emerald branches. Beneath the silent explosive starbursts framed heavenly in rainbow embraces. Tom, wait. It's not safe. Jane's shouted warning barely registered. Because ahead Emma lifted one small hand toward blood-hued glass in parasitic welcome. Changed supple child fingers into gnarled welcoming claw. Horrified Tom shook his head fiercely trying dispelling the waking nightmare scenario. But she merely smiled deeper sensing his turmoil, drinking life essence through the blood that rooted this unholy communion. Twin beams abruptly speared Tom's adapted vision as Jane gunned the Toyota forward straight at the swelling horde. Mindless forms parted sluggishly making way for the small war machine and one desperate father trapped outside time's constraints. Skidding sideways Jane braked sharply mere yards from the glowing vortex. Frantic she clambered up beside Tom, boots slipping wildly for purchase in the muddy ruts. Gripping his shoulders vice-tight her nails bit even through thick layers. Tom. Stay with me, it's not her. Jane gave him a teeth-rattling shake as if trying to dislodge the alien hold staring back. We end this now before Kringle's curse spreads any farther. Her words finally penetrated the blood pounding in his ears. Tom wrenched his eyes from Emma's sightless gaze with immense effort. Gasping he staggered under the sedan's brilliant interrogation lights, anchors slowly reseating his unmoored psyche. Glancing wildly behind them Tom glimpsed dozens more townspeople undulating closer through the heavy snowfall. Drawn helplessly by their sedan's shining beacon heralding warm shelter and answers. Cursing Tom lunged into the Toyota throwing it into reverse with a guttural scream. Gun it! Bracing hard they fishtailed away from desperate grasping limbs suddenly swiping through fragile windows. Lurching backward from the glowing pine condemning over 100 souls to oblivion beneath its voluptuous spell. Gasping they slowed to a risky stop half obscured behind adjacent firs. Through the swirling flurries ahead, Tom still glimpsed Emma's grotesquely twisted silhouette against the blood-stained glass, pulsing eager. The Queen's climax peaked nigh. Would they abandon their host now despite promises of salvation? Emma's fraying human psyche keened, feeling the lifeline stretch taut cruelly even as her fingers obediently continued weaving nightshade garlands. Preparing mortal temples for the true moon's ascendance into flesh when screams rang the death knell of old cosmic rule. Do it now, before more surround us. Jane's harsh whip-crack demand jarred Tom's hallucinatory visions aside. Gripping one handspike axe left forgotten in the footwell, he stumbled from the idling sedan. His boots slid recklessly through icy ruts toward towering pines swallowing the sky whole. Behind, Jane gunned their engine, drawing the confused mob inland under deceit of answers. Her voice blasted distorted through crackling speakers as the Toyota carved erratic circles, scattering bodies forcibly aside. But the mindless herd merely reformed around both rolling distraction and towering beacon, vulnerable now to Tom's heaving advance. Pine boughs loomed nearer, jewelry glinting innocently down. Baring his teeth savagely, Tom swung hard into yielding sapwood. Again. Ragged breaths plumed erratic as he hacked wildly into sugar veins sustaining the parasite root. All around, townspeople began shouting, confused as blood scented the air. The Queen's spelled children felt their mother's heartbeat stutter gravely from brutal intrusion. Swaying, they turned inward, collectively seeking the attacker. Protect the womb, granting their cleansed souls unity. With a mighty two-handed blow, Tom felt icy sap spray his contorted face just as dozens of bodies mobbed closer. He screamed hoarse obscenities, wreathing the shining pine with more relentless strikes. Any moment the enthralled hordes would overwhelm him forever if crimson life fluid ceased pulsing. If he failed, severing the psychic sucker linking Kringle's cursed tree soldiers into one hive entity. If not, Emma. Blunt force exploded across Tom's clenched spine. Whirling, he glimpsed the sheriff's ruby face howling mutely, cudgel arcing high for killing dissent. Crack. Ruth's skis slashed brutally across the lawman's face, sending him sprawling sideways. Silently she spun, wielding an obsidian blade, slashing manic faces approaching from all sides. Holding forward position, shrieking for Tom to finish it. End our suffering. With crazed drive, Tom turned, attacking the Queen Pine's gushing stump anew as chaos erupted everywhere. Jane's sedan careened wildly, scattering bodies before hurtling hard into an adjacent fir meters away. Steam erupted from its mangled hood in defeat. Yet Tom hacked harder, sweat and sap plastering his eyes blind. Whole branches toppled, crowning nearby devotees who merely blanketed around the sagging temple unafraid. Unknowing of the black storm descending within their alabaster master, toward every tapped vessel linked inexorably back to this blood anchor site. Howling raggedly, Tom glimpsed the Queen Pine's aura, dim hellish crimson before his hammering heart. Felt the psychic death pulse transmitting outward through gossamer fairy light cords, enslaving helpless followers across the barren land. Across spacetime itself as Kringle's pagan curse erupted, ending the first glorious era. With a gunshot crack, the blood-soaked fir toppled sideways, crushing Emma and the innermost worshippers beneath its moaning boughs. Screams instantly erupted from 100 mouths, released brutally back into independent sentience. Gasping, Tom scrambled recklessly over shifting branches and shrieking bodies toward where last he glimpsed Emma's beloved curly head lolling gentle in supplication. The blood moon behind his eyelids dimmed rapidly, abandoning its terrestrial anchor. Emma. He flung broken limbs aside, frantic, finding only strangers' dazed faces. Ruth speared bodies up from deeper boughs by her parka hood, yet none were the beloved features etched on Tom's heart. Until a half-buried hand weakly lifted from beneath bloodied needles. Choking his relief, Tom clawed branches, exposing Emma's bruised face and unfocused eyes meeting his at long last, present in the moment. Her chapped lips parted in slow surprise. Daddy. Emma's disoriented whisper swelled decades worth of gratitude piercing Tom's pounding chest. Sobbing, he clutched her close, heedless of swaying forms regaining their own tattered footing across the snow plains. He'd walk barefoot through permafrost 1,000 years if meaning Emma's sweet, brilliant soul persevered beyond this long night. Beyond Kringle's deadly campaign against peace and light. Face nestled against his shoulder, Tom felt Emma nod wearily. With immense effort she lifted both arms, hugging his heaving neck, so very frail and unbreakably tenacious all at once. Voice raw with tears, she echoed softly, "Can we go home now?" Chapter 15. Kneeling in the snow, Tom cradled Emma close as chaos reigned around them. Screams and shouting echoed through the trees where moments before deadly silence reigned. As the psychic link fueling Kringle's wicked spell shattered along with the Queen Pine's ruptured roots, chaos erupted from freed townspeople suddenly cognizant of their bizarre circumstances. Some fled screaming blindly into the blizzard, while others roused dazed family members now shivering violently against the deadly cold without shoes or proper clothing. Cries for help split the night as scant emergency responders hurried to triage those most vulnerable. Oblivious to the turmoil, Tom clasped Emma's precious face, searching intently for any lingering darkness haunting her young eyes. Sweet pea, do you know what's happening?" He barely breathed the tentative question. Brow furrowing, Emma glanced around uncertainly. Her teeth chattered violently, but she clung tighter to her father's shoulders, almost remembering. The mean trees wanted everyone to follow the lights. Her eyes roved upward briefly through broken pine boughs as if seeing phantom constellations. Something made me help gather people to the Queen. But now she's dead. Emma peered down again into Tom's taut face, vision clearing. "You came chopping the bad branches." Her mittened hand lifted delicately, tracing his stubbled cheek. "You saved me from the dark, Daddy." Joyful relief flooded Tom's chest, hearing Emma's precious innocence intact despite trauma endured under the spell, endured alone by his sweet, brave daughter, separated so cruelly from those sworn protect her. Overwhelmed, he crushed Emma fiercely to his heaving chest. Silent apologies flowed from his soul for all she'd suffered, held captive by supernatural forces they never saw coming, by one unassuming ornament glittering beautifully deadly under their own roof. Nearby calls for EMT services increased sharply as more unlucky victims succumbed to deadly exposure. Several broad evergreen boughs still smoldered where Jane had crashed the Toyota, igniting dry needles, a sinister echo of the flaming chaos they'd narrowly escaped tonight. Beneath the rising smoke eddies, Tom lifted his face sharply toward the two women who'd shared their harrowing crusade beyond all reasonable expectations, who together helped heap devastation upon Kringle's twisted, brainwashed legion when all seemed lost for their people, their precious child. Through the swirling chaos, Tom glimpsed Ruth wrapping emergency blankets around a distraught elderly couple underneath a firetruck's flashing strobe. Across the glade, Jane hovered close as medics rushed another unconscious victim into a waiting ambulance for critical transport. Their eyes met briefly with Tom's across the rolling chaos. Raw emotion flashed briefly between both women before Jane broke away, responding to paramedic questions. Ruth offered Tom a quick, subtle thumbs up before returning focus to her own shocked patients. Swallowing thickly, Tom managed an unsteady nod of gratitude toward Ruth, striding the disaster scope with such tireless, calm authority. Toward Jane, still calmly facilitating emergency triage through her own grief and exhaustion as only seasoned nurses could. Their selfless poise reminded Tom sharply of duties still left before this catastrophe ended, as father and as able leader again for those relying his direction now. Clearing his throat gravelly, he forced resolve back into aching muscles as he stood slowly cradling Emma tighter. Guilt lanced him, taking in dozens of shivering people milling aimlessly through the ravaged glade full of broken bodies, severed evergreen branches, lingering hostages to a trauma none could adequately explain, let alone process, with minds yet clutching splinters from psychic slavery. By damn, if he didn't owe each innocent soul abducted into Kringle's winter witchery at least some attempt answers and leadership while emergency crews stabilized critical injuries first. With effort Tom shuffled through deep drifts over to Ruth's guarded fire truck. Gently he transferred a groggy Emma into her startled arms. Hey. She seems okay cognitively, but we need getting her warm fast. Tom smoothed Emma's hair tenderly off her face. No extremities frostbite that I can see, but check extra careful please. I need to help coordinate whatever commanding dynamics are possible right now. Clearly reluctant to separate, Tom gave Emma's mittened hand a fierce squeeze, voice tight. You be strong for me, okay, button? Dad and I won't leave your side once everyone is safe. Throat suddenly choked. Tom pressed lips hard into her knitted cap, breathing her precious scent before forcing resolve into spine and stride. Emma sniffled but nodded, bravely clinging to Ruth's steadying presence beside other recovering victims. Approaching Jane's triage huddle, Tom made brief eye contact with two other officers milling uncertainly nearby. He beckoned them closer with brusque authority. All right, gentlemen, let's establish who has positional leadership and how we can jointly assist EMT personnel for greatest injury impact. His crisp tone belied bone weariness but snapped both uniforms taller instantly. The eldest hesitated only a moment, assessing Tom in his muddy ripped coat before nodding sharply toward where a female deputy directed evac chains beside several ambulances. Man, there is Sergeant Quinn, our field lieutenant on nights. She rode primary medical oversight before, well, all this mess. The younger deputy grimaced uneasily. As the odd group moved toward flashing rack lights, Tom clapped each man's shoulder. That's exactly who we need then. Let's get updated on critical victim status and assist this operation any capacity needed. These people been through hell, it's our job now making sure they come out the other side in one piece. Both men managed uneven smiles under peppering snowflakes. But they followed Tom readily through the chaos toward purpose and stability and fragile hope the dawn could yet bring. For the next brutal hours, Tom supported coordinating any resource gaps identified by emergency crews racing the deadly temperature drop. The other officers assisted managing shell-shocked civilians wandering aimlessly, reuniting hysterical families and securing transport for those critically endangered. Gradually victims, two unstable lined evacuation buses for urgent hospital transport further inland. Once remaining search teams confirmed no casualties lingered behind. Across the glade, Ruth beckoned Tom urgently from her flanked ambulance, ready to shuttle Emma and other recovering patients to emergency warm shelters. Scrubbing both bloodied hands down his frozen face, Tom turned to confer last minute with Sergeant Quinn. But she dismissed him sharply toward care and rest before more weight found his stooped shoulders. Your family needs you now, sir. We'll handle final cleanup. Her stern features softened briefly with a knowing look. Ain't nothing awaiting back there but pain and questions that won't keep. Overwhelmed by her compassion and wisdom, Tom stared silently. But in the piercing ambulance lights her uniform seemed to swell suddenly, holding every daughter, mother and wisdom keeper's spirit under these wintry stars. A conscious embodiment rousing him back toward precious heartbeats that anchored Tom still to sacred duty. And gentle redemption waiting soft as Emma's trusting hand still extended behind steely barricades, beckoning her faithful guardian back to promised warmth and wholeness beyond the blood moon's savage intrusion. Wordlessly, Tom gripped the sergeant's shoulder with a heart too full to encapsulate out loud. But her answering nod swelled equal with unspoken kinship as she nudged him gently toward waiting vehicles grown loud, impatient now. Toward lamplight and tender mercy glowing bold within ruthless night, ever struggling spread dark roots further, but held once more at bay by weary heroes whose soul light burned faithful, pushing back against chaos incursion. Stumbling with immense weariness and relief and fragile hope buoying his trudging soles skyward, Tom turned his back on the ravaged grove toward family and promise of home and rest beyond the horizon nightmares. Chapter 16. Inside the spare ambulance cab, Tom huddled with Emma bundled in his arms and Jane pressed close on his other side. As they jostled over rutted backroads toward emergency shelters, he soaked up their precious nearness, barely daring believe the nightmare ended with his little girl safe once more. Tom gently kissed Emma's hair where she dozed, cradled against his chest, drained from her trauma ordeal. Though reportedly uninjured, doctors insisted she remain under observation given so much unknown about what long-term damage severing Kringle's psychic parasite tree spells could inflict on captive minds. A heavy question loomed: what wider permanent impact spread to the 100 other enthralled townsfolk, emergency responders, and untold travelers passing through who'd fallen prey? Tom shook himself inwardly, refusing sticky fear back in. This was a victory, however strange and traumatic for their community. Kringle failed, killing them or expanding his twisted kingdom further tonight. Thanks to so much selfless personal sacrifice, both human and evergreen. Drawing a ragged breath, Tom pressed muted lips to Emma's mittened fingers, then Jane's clammy forehead, leaning exhausted on his shoulder. Their family persevered this unnatural disaster against all odds, stacked towering. Let tomorrow's light expose whatever lingering shadows it willed. Tonight his only task was clasping tight these two precious heartbeats as their convoy rolled steady toward shelter and calm and hard-won Christmas peace. The emergency triage center bustled, efficiently directing new refugee batches behind industrial dividers for assessment when Tom's ambulance batch arrived. He hesitated, surrendering Emma to unfamiliar clinical hands after their extended separation nightmare. But gentle nurses kept up soothing chatter for her benefit through each procedure, which seemed help smooth away paternal reluctance. Once Emma was safely admitted for monitoring, Jane drew Tom quietly aside. Silently they embraced, bone-weary and profoundly grateful to share this fragile aftermath moment whole and unbroken. When she finally leaned away, Tom was startled to glimpse silent tears glazing Jane's exhausted eyes. Concerned, he brushed a stray curl behind her ear, searching her face. "Hey. What is it? Are you in pain anywhere?" His thumb lingered delicate across one sharp cheekbone, looking for any subtle tell of concealed injury. "Talk to me, sweetheart." Sniffing sharply, Jane managed a wavery laugh, swiping twin trails away roughly. "No, nothing like that. Just overwhelmed, realizing how bad everything could have gone tonight." Uncharacteristically, she swiped almost angrily at more tears escaping before settling trembling hands onto Tom's chest. "When I crashed the car through those trees aiming for that awful glowing pine." She suppressed a violent shiver. "God, for minutes laying there stunned, all I could think was how I'd failed saving Emma from the spell. That you both would die or become trapped too while I laid useless in wreckage just yards away." Tom smoothed both hands gently down her shoulders. "Jane, look at me. We made it. All three of us safe now because of your quick thinking, exposing that cursed tree when you did." He tilted her chin up firmly. "Don't spiral down dark paths imagining what ifs. We walk in the light together from here on out, understand?" Sniffing sharply, Jane searched his eyes before nodding with effort. Tom folded her close again, allowing his solid presence radiate all the wordless comfort and security he could manifest through their unbroken bond. For endless moments they clung together, just breathing, letting adrenaline madness bleed away, slowly replaced by hope again. But nearby footsteps soon intruded on their fragile peace. Looking over Jane's shoulder, Tom spotted Ruth waving them toward a screened-off sleeping area. Her drawn face managed a wan smile, beckoning them to rest at long last. Inside the sheltered cubicle, Tom guided an almost sleepwalking Jane down onto crisp emergency cots. Too exhausted even removing their snow-crusted outerwear, they simply collapsed limply together. Ruth smoothed stray curls off Jane's cheek before moving quietly aside, sorting through hand-me-down donated clothing for them to change into eventually. Meanwhile, Tom pulled scratchy blankets up over Jane and himself, fully clothed, breathing each other's familiar scents like the only stable anchorage left in a world still tilting dangerously. He had no idea how much time passed drifting half-conscious in warmth and security. But too soon Tom roused blearily to new footsteps and familiar voices murmuring. He blinked sluggishly up from under blankets toward Ruth, gently shaking his knee. Behind her, Sergeant Quinn and both deputies stood, grave but unthreatening. Confused, Tom cleared his throat, sitting up straighter without dislodging Jane, still dead asleep. He squinted between the officers and Ruth hesitantly. "Sorry, did something else happen?" Sudden worry clenched his guts that Kringle's evil resurged outside while they recovered vulnerable here. But Sergeant Quinn stepped forward, palms raised. "No, nothing new to report. The evacuation zone still empty under perimeter guard." Her voice remained low out of deference toward sleeping refugees. "We just need first-hand statements while events stay fresh. Whenever y'all are able." Reading Tom's visible reluctance as Jane slumbered on, Ruth added gently, "I already gave my account so they can log events and witness corroboration accurately for department records." Her eyes shone with encouragement toward him. Scrubbing at his bleary beard, Tom nodded wearily. He turned, pressing a soft kiss to Jane's hair, lingering to inhale her precious scent and gather fortitude facing the trauma recounting ahead, bracing himself to dredge up words for the unspeakable visions that would haunt behind his eyes for countless nights beyond this. But morning dawned soft and unassuming when Tom finally emerged from the makeshift sheriff station erected on-site overnight. Clouds rolled thinner, unveiling gentle blue through the breaks across the distant mountain skyline. Snowflake eddies sparkled brighter, somehow cleansed by heavy truth-telling catharsis despite bitter ashes still coating his tongue. All around, Tom noticed the temporary village stirring, hopeful also, refugees milling the messy food lines in donated mismatched clothes, quiet laughter sounding again through tent walls. Cigarette smoke curled thinner from men keeping uneasy vigil near guarded tree lines. But light slowly permeated everyone's faces, expectant with second chances. And inside Tom's chest too, a tiny green shoot unfurled, embryonic toward that thin sunlight. Hope beyond hope their ravaged community could heal in time the wounds sustained on this brutal solstice turn when one corrupted soul nearly unraveled all bonds between them. When nature herself turned complicit against human frailties. But walking steadily forward, Tom paused his tracks, rounding a bustling mess tent. He lifted both palms skyward, breathing deep the crisp pine scent mingling with wood smoke and fried potatoes, taking solemn conscious comfort from the forest dwelling they'd nearly been slaughtered within, now promising refuge and absolution. Because creation's heart held righteous balance functioning for them and against. Both destruction and salvation sprouted equal from dark loam and noble sap if mankind stood stalwart steward honoring old covenants. And now footsteps approached lighter behind Tom's shoulder, turning him expectant toward new opportunity. Toward family and promise keeper he traversed all earthly wilderness beside this life and next. Their people prevailed tonight by selfless loyalty and love the ancient trees and stars themselves must honor. Now breathing deep of free sky and smoke and understanding, Tom turned to greet his precious daughter's bright face, eager, carrying hot chocolate toward possibilities still unfurling pristine ahead. Toward their unwritten gift so painfully redeemed this year, each other. Chapter 17. In the days following the harrowing Christmas Eve battle, Tom devoted himself completely to reuniting his family amidst the larger recovery efforts overtaking Evergreen Hills. He quietly absorbed the unfolding news reports of mass hallucinations somehow afflicting their remote region that night, along with scattered other rural counties. Baffled health authorities pointed vaguely to possible airborne contaminants or obscure hysterical syndromes mentioned in medical journals. But behind doors families whispered darker theories of curses, government experimentation gone awry. That old Mr. Kringle who ran the novelty shop downtown had always given them the creeps. Why hadn't anyone seen the strange recluse since? Clearing his throat gruffly, Tom switched off the ambulance's crackling radio during one late-night ride-along, checking refugee camp peripheries. He avoided meeting the EMT driver's questioning eyes through the rearview mirror, instead staring out at silent snowfall masking barren forests temporarily devoid of magical light. The night stood somehow darker and colder in the spell's aftermath despite blazing chemical heaters and generators powering temporary communal shelters. Like the entire town now existed hemmed onto a tiny glowing island, survivors huddled together in the black void absence where Kringle's brilliance once burned blinding bright. Shivering, Tom glanced down to where Emma dozed fitfully against his chest, feeling her small hand fist his coat tighter. At least evac coordinators allowed his precious girl remain close by his side given all she endured under the mysterious mass psychosis. Though initially deemed physically healthy, Emma continued battling night terrors and anxious attachment behaviors which doctors felt safest accommodating temporarily until equilibrium restored for both their strained psyches. So Tom carried her bundled close through tireless days organizing community rebuilding efforts, recovery meetings, backbreaking manual cleanups across their downtown battlefield aftermath, then nights rocking Emma frail in the darkness as shadows hissed freezing through canvas tent walls. Whispers promising lasting winter in every fearful racing heart beyond. Because the Queen Pine's absence left ghosts still for countless souls. Even Emma whimpered at night about the cold white trees with burning branches, their bone fingers clawing inside windows screaming why as Tom soothed her fighting imaginary demons. During warmer daylight pockets, their fractured community drew solace and motivation seeing everyone likewise battle private sorrows. Spirits lifted mutually hauling salvaged wreckage, sweeping glass shards glinting painfully bright beneath sunrays promising someday renewed joys unshadowed. Tom paused one brilliant afternoon watching Michael shriek excited hauling sleds with other children down gentle banks the plows carved near temporary cafeteria tents. His temple scar stretched ugly but the doctor guaranteed no lasting neurological damage somehow. Catching sight of his father Michael waved eagerly, still innocent believing their family's world intact as ever, still ignorant whatever supernatural forces possessed his sister's soul nearly cost him everything beyond living nightmares. Blinking harshly, Tom turned his face aside unable to withstand the searing gratitude, to wave back casual pretending normalcy instead of scream thanks heavenward for this simple restored grace, his son still breathing, still laughing, still blessedly himself after the madness ended. Instead Tom walked faster downhill avoiding Michael's quizzical stare. Dark firs stood sentinel deeper surrounding their havens, needled arms still threatening somehow in daylight. Lingering night whispered endless behind each narrow trunk unjudged by glaring sun or signs of cheerful rebuilding. The forest's patience swallowed mortal relief in a heartbeat. Hung endless. Chapter 18. 6 months after the Christmas Eve disaster, Tom stood solemn witnessing the abandoned pine grove consecrated as memorial grounds for victims lost that night. He held Emma's mittened hands snugly as she leaned into his reassuring leg warmth. Though spring's hopeful thaw melted their breath in optimistic white puffs, Tom felt winter ghosts stirring restless around the dedication crowd as evergreen boughs creaked softly overhead. Because despite relieved tears and mournful speeches honoring the trauma past, an unspoken dread yet pervaded the still healing psyches all around. Lingering hypervigilance tensing shoulders walking too near any clustered pines even circumnavigating town plaza fringes in daylight. Subtle glances exchanged when someone coughed strangely in line at the bank. Friends who once embraced laughing now subdued by perspective brutally corrected Thanksgiving Eve under merciless constellations, memories preserved inside snowbanks calcifying slowly to permafrost. Survivor hearts hardened bittersweet whatever ephemeral comforts this memorial stone circle brought dedicated to those never returning, this feeble haven consecrated over Deadfall Hollow beneath which something evil yet lurked unnamed. No granite monument or cloying spring blossoms could exorcise memories of beloved faces and blue fingers clawing panic through glass as motors failed, windows fogged blocking their frantic loved ones just paces away powerless interfering as the brilliant pines compelled them outward, into the silent endless white where hot blood steamed deliciously. Sighing raggedly, Tom squeezed Emma's mittened palm firm as Mayor Fisher concluded the dedication remarks, clearly also battling private grief specters whatever canned public persona projected. Around them survivors shifted stiffly, clearly equally haunted despite the tranquil birdsong, the tender sprouts braving soil still blood-enriched from panicked feet compacting snow. Funerary rites stood delicately superimposed against an immortal evil whose roots Hiroshima could not purge, nor salt nor prayer ritual lay exorcised wholly in fertilizer and celluloid dreams. It waited patient beyond reason, beyond life cycles feeble measured by spine-thin memorial placards. A patient rot belonging to endless grim epochs when antlered kings ruled the endless forests and screaming sacrifices bled out glad beneath the solstice midnight glare. Shivering violently, Tom knelt, squeezing Emma tight as folks began dispersing quietly. He breathed purposefully slow, measuring her beloved heartbeat as unwelcome images threatened resurfacing. Focus grounded, fully present in this precious child whose innocent survival meant everything after their community battened its unseen walking wounded, this precious moment when furious gales could not find their tender ship behind sunlit canvas walls glowing, where warm soup bubbled fragrant awaiting their happy home beyond the still trees peering with 1,000 sightless eyes. "Daddy, your heart sounds too fast." Tom blinked down into Emma's concerned frown, studying him so intently. Her small mitten traced his cheek softly. "Are you scared of the woods still?" Love and sorrow flooded Tom's vision until Emma's face blurred, blessedly unreadable. He crushed her close, desperately praying some merciful power preserve her precious psyche in glass beyond reach of past blood or future darkness yet awaiting all mortal souls. She was too good, too sweet. Emma deserved keeping measureless seasons unfettered by truths adults battled in despairing silence. If nothing else spared for them in this life, by God let his precious child waltz careless into brilliant summers with heart buoyed gentle on rolling mists unseeable. Leave her be, you damned silent firs clustering expectant beyond their brittle civilization's folly markers. Choking down saline burning his throat, Tom managed lifting Emma eye level so she recognized his smiling mask. "No way, I've got zero worries with my brave girl keeping monsters away." He crinkled his eyes conspiratorial, making her giggle self-consciously. Lightness blessedly diffused the anxious creases pinching her youthful brow. "Tell ya what though, OL Dad could sure use some hot chocolate reinforcement back at the lodge. These rusty knees ain't built for long winter ceremonies nowadays." He exaggerated creaky effort, standing stiffly. Emma rolled her eyes smirking but dutifully proffered one mittened hand which Tom squeezed delicately between both his larger palms. Together they navigated the path branching away from latent ghosts whispering gleeful through blood-soaked pine boughs and this feeble community circus grasping at smoke visions of closure. Twin pairs of boots drifted slow, appreciating birdsong brightening the lonely walk toward haven sustaining weary hearts. Any second darkness fell desperate beyond mapped lands, familiar faces disappeared, but today golden light prevailed beaming tender restoration, faith and mercy yet holding chaos dim and distant and gentler seasons promised rhythm eternal remain unchanged if they dwelled only love boldly. Today was enough. The end.